Doch es war das Zusammenkommen verbunden mit den Jahrzeit noch den Taten und mit über kam Pomim, was Afal Pi, was Lecheiro, in das Aline von Aproti, wie bald aber Bichlal Asiden kleiden sich zusammen, wird es schön Alinien Kloli, ist ätzend Sach, wo das Retzach wegen der Jahrzeit von Aiden, was hat sich Meister Nefesh gewähnt, al-Haklal. Und das ist gewähnt, die Derech HaTeva, die Siebe von sein Nicht-Ariches Yomim, die Vierlech. Der Fall, was mit Zadavidose Bishvil Haklal, hat man früher reingesetzt bei Meister in Arrest und danach verschickt und dort Gufe gemattert, und das gewähnt, der Levushim bei Derech HaTeva, was der Vater gewähnt, nicht in Ariches Yomim, wie es hat gedarf sein bei Derech HaTeva. Jetzt auch das Gufe, Madgish, hat das Ayin, was es scheich ist zu Aklau, und befragt noch, aber wie bald das Miset, hat die Peris von seinem Messias Nefesh bei Medina Hahi, einen haben gebracht, Peris und Peris, das heißt bei Pashtus, Iden, wo sie seine Leben die Teile und Schemere Mitzvah, Bechaye Jem, nicht gucken dich auf dem Matzel, wie sie gewähnt dorten, bei schon Grezman Hahu und nachher dann noch in die Jahren Liachrise, wo das ist der Hecht Abir, auf der Linie von der Jahrzeit, wo die Gemorre sagt sich la Haloche, als es beschaße da ein Ziel an die Zies an der Schomme beguf, das Bedugme von der Srefe, von der Sefer Teiro, wird sich die Scheile sich adover wie Fuche, a Yid mit Magid Dvorev Lianke, Chukov und Mishpotev Yisro, was jeder Lostos der Rebesteller soll sein, der Sefer Teiro, Shenisrefo. Das Hepech Halocho, do fun Gufe verstandig, hat der Pikuach Nefesh, was wird durch Ruf aufgetan, der Aliyah Achig Delo, was durch Ruf, was wird durch Ruf herauskommen, Ezeche Deche, Afil Azam in Ingen, Achim Avil, wo das bringt noch zu Frauen der Jahrzeit. Wo das Ezeche Adbir ve Hezber, Abishas do a Tag von der Jahrzeit. Allachas kamen von der Gordel bei Yisro. Allachas kamen von der Sami, was hat sich Meister Nefesh gewähnt. Al-Haklal, und hat angenommen sein Messias Nefesh, bis Messias Nefesh bepeil, kleis an Neshama Mahaguf.
Baruchim Aboyim, and welcome to the panel marking Chov, the 76th yard site of Harav Rebbe Yitzchak, the Rebbe's father. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and we would like to start today's program by listening to opening remarks from the Rebbe's Chazer, Rabbi Khan.
בקשר לחוב אב, יום ההילולה של רבי, אבא של הרבי, אני רציתי להעיר, זה דבר פשוט אפילו, אבל אף פעם כן כדאי להעיר. זה לא יורצייט זה לא רק יורצייט של רבי. ונגיע לנו. מה זה נגיע לנו? פשוט מאוד. כל השנים, עד נ"ד, אז הרבי היה עורך יורצייט ביום זה. היום זה עומד מתפלל לפני עמוד, ונרות על נרות, קדש, כל דברים האלה. כמו שזה עשה, היה עורך יורצייט של אבא בכל השנים, כמובן, מכיוון שהשתכח יתרם בחיי, אז גם כעת הוא עושה כל העבודה הזאת, הנרות ומשנייס ופברנגן, והכל היה עושה. אם הרבי, יום היורצייט של הרבי היה עושה, ואנחנו, חסידים שלו, על כל פעם צריכים להיות חסידים שלו, אז צריכים גם כן עלינו, יום זה לא סתם יום יורצייט של אבא של הרבי, ויורצייט של כל אחד מאיתנו אורחים. במה אורחים? יש הרבה שמדליקים נרות, זה דבר טוב, יש אומרים קדש, זה דבר טוב, אבל כמדומני לא זה העניין. העניין הוא שכל אחד מאיתנו יתחיל להתעורר ונגיע לפועל, ונגיע מהיום כהחלטות טובות. העיקר, מה שנגיע לתלמידי הישיבות, הישיבה זה הדבר הכי עיקרי. מזמן האחרון, אז הישיבה לגמרי לא מסודרת. לא צריך לדבר בחסרונות, לדבר בעמלות. זה זמן כזה שהרבה בחורים גרים בבורו פארק, הרבה בחורים גרים כאן. קשר, אבל התאספו יחד והסתדרו סדר על ידי מחשב, על ידי מה, אז סדר ישיבה. בכוחו של הרבי, בכוחו של האבא של היורצייט, והכוח של הרבי, של סדר ישיבה. העיקר הוא, הישיבה זה דבר כלל, זה לא פרט. ממה נעשית ישיבה? יש בחורים, זה העיקר, בחורים שרוצים ללמוד, זה העיקר. וחוץ מזה, בחורים שרוצים ללמוד, בחורים שרוצים שיהיו בעול בהנהגה של ישיבה, ובהם בכלל על מה שבפרט. אז התאספנו כעת לסדר ישיבה כפי שהיה צריך. יש הסדרים של הישיבה, סדרי הנגלה, סדרי החסידות, שיעורים. בכל במרשם אחרי שבת יסדרו רשימה מכל שיעור. יש בחורים תיירים, יש בחורים תיירים. אז כמה שאפשר נסדר מרשם כל אלה שבכנס. באדרבה, כל אחד יגיד שעה, בכל שעה שמתקבלת רק להגביר את לימוד הנגלה ולימוד החסידות, זה העיקר. ודאי שצריך עוד דברים, צריך ללכת למצואים, אבל ישיבה בתור ישיבה, הדבר העיקרי הוא הישיבה, סדרי הנגלה, סדרי החסידות, וגם כן ביום שישי המצואים, וגם כן חלק מהישיבה. הרבי רוצה את זה, וחלק מהזמן יהיה המצואים, זה גם כן חלק מהישיבה. בעיקר הוא ההתמסרות. איך כתוב בחומש? אברהם אבינו אמר למרדים, תן לי הנפש, לא שאלה תן לי הנפש, תן לי זה, תן לי זה, תן לי זה, לא. תן לי הנפש הכי שלך, באיפה הנפש שלך. כל בחור צריך לדעת שהוא חלק מהישיבה. תן לי הנפש. ואם זה חלק מהישיבה, במילא יתמסר לבחורים עשיירים יותר, יסדר הסדרים אחרים, לבחורים יותר מבוגרים, ככה. כשהבחורים היו ביפן, מסתם שמעתם, היה, סדרו ישיבה, לא סלומי פסוק, שאומרים. הם בעצמם סדרו ישיבה, סדרו משגיח, סדרו משפיע, סדרו רמם, סדרו הכל. ואנחנו רוצים לקוות שהכינוס הזה תמלא במידה מסוימת, תמלא המחסור, ונראה עוד פעם איך שהרבי אומר קדש בכל העניינים האלה, ושזה יהיה היורצת האחרון, ואחר כך כבר גם הכל בשמחה בביאת המשיח.
We now move on to the panel. I would like to introduce today's panelists, starting with Rabbi Shmuel, the Rebbe Shliach in London, England, Rabbi Yosef Hecht, the Rebbe Shliach in Eilat, Eretz HaKodesh, Rabbi Shmuel Grezman, the Rebbe Shliach in Yerushalayim, the Shliach to Eis B'Sefer Torah for children, and Rabbi Mendel Feller, the Rebbe Shliach in Minnesota. Before I ask Rabbi Lou to begin, firstly, Rabbi Meir Harlig was not able to make it today due to technical issues with the internet service where he was at the time. So hopefully, perhaps he will join us later. But for now, we will start with Rabbi Lou. In regards to Chafaf in general, it may not seem to really stick out as a Yom Pagra, as Yutrat and other days, because there wasn't anything really that really showed it to be different than other days. However, we all know that the day of Chafaf was the Rebbe's Persönlicher Tag, the Rebbe's personal day. And that day he chose to spend with his Chassidim, by the Fabringans, by davenings, and us being the Rebbe's children, obviously is very significant to every single one of us, the day of Chafaf. And without further ado, we will delve into the years how Chafaf was spent in the Rebbe's court. So starting with Rabbi Shmuel, who was a Bacher in the late Yuds and the early Chafs, and experienced many interesting encounters with the Rebbe's Chana and other interesting encounters in general with the Rebbe. And we would like to ask him to please share a few words of his memories of Chafaf throughout the years.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Rabbi Tzion. Let me give a little bit of background. I hope you don't mind if I say a little bit personal. The first that I heard of Chafaf, and as you say, it was not one of the famous Yom Pagdas that were there, Miyomim Yamima. And Yud Shvat was mainly seen as the Hilula of the Frierdiker Rebbe. It was before anything like Rosh Chodesh Kislev. It was before Yud Aleph Nisim was known as a Yom Tov. It was before Hey Tevis. It was before all of these different things. And the Bachrim, the Rebbe's Amei, who really showed the way to take over the world, first the earliest Shluchim, but they were then Bachrim. To them, this is the feeling that I got as beginning as an outsider. To them, this was the day, because it's the Rebbe's Atov. Because it was something of the Rebbe's personal life, because of that, it had a more pneumistic effect. The first I heard about it, I was actually in Camp Aguda. There was no Gan Yisrael. I'm talking about Tovshin Tes Vov. I'm talking about 1955. And I was a boy, a junior in high school in Torah Vodaas. And I was introduced by Rabbi Yishmael Gurari to a Tanya Shia by Rabbi Beryl Shem Tov in camp. The Bochum of Lubavitch, after Merkez Shlichus, they'd go and spend a week or so in the different other frum camps that there were. There was just 2 or 3 camps anyway. And they made a big Farbrengen. And they invited some of us who went to Tanya Shiyurim. I don't think there were more than 20 or 30 people. The camp had hundreds of people. But I was at this Farbrengen, and there must have been about 60, 70 people just at that Farbrengen. And the head counselor heard it almost sound like a coup, like a takeover of the whole camp. And he came was in the dining room. They took over the dining room. And the head counselor came in, and he said, "What's going on? They say it's a special day today, and they're making a Farbrengen." And he was afraid to allow it, so they made a rule: anybody who learns in the Lubavitcher Yeshiva can stay, and anybody who doesn't has to leave. And I wasn't learning Lubavitcher Yeshiva; I had to leave, and it actually made a very deep impression on me because it was a big camp in High Mount, New York, and I was on the hill, on the younger hill. It must have been a quarter of a mile away or more, and I could hear them singing Yemin Hashem Remeima. I remember that, hearing that, going over the mountains that night. Nobody checked on what we were actually doing instead of being at that Farbrengen. It was in Yonam Shel Mad Bekach, B'Loshen Saginoh. Anyway, and I was impressed that here were these Tamimim, here were these young Lubavitcher people who not only were teaching Tanya, but they cared about something, and it was significant to them, and they were talking about it, and they were singing about it. That was the first year by me. The second time that I heard about Chafaf was in Tovshin Tes Zayin in Camp Gan Yisrael. I went to Camp Gan Yisrael. My mother, Aleha Shalom, sent me and my 2 younger brothers to Camp Aguda the year before, not because we had anything to do with the Aguda, but because Rabbi Moshe Lazar was there. It was Lazar, not at the camp. And the next year, he said he's starting a different camp. He said, "Okay, you went to that camp." It was the Gavra, not the Hecht. And so we went to Camp Gan Yisrael, and there on Chafaf, nearby, I remember it was on the lawn there, a big Farbrengen of all the camp, all the kids and all the counselors. I was a counselor even though I was only 16 years old. And they spoke about Reb Leivik. I'll tell you the story which I remember. The story they told was when he was in a situation where he had no food and no drink, in prison maybe. And then they gave him a small amount of water. and that was just to survive. He needed that just to live. It was possibly beneath survival amount. And what he did was, the first thing he did was he used as much as he had to, minimum possible, but maximum needed, to wash his hands in the Netilas Yadayim. And I wasn't actually, when Rabbi Pearson asked me to speak, I wasn't thinking of that story, but today, it was in the Shir HaRambam today, near the end of the third Perek, was this very type of a situation. And actually, there's a Gemara and Erevin, a Ma'aser Rabbi Akiva, and this was the Mesiras Nefesh of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, for Poshet to do a mitzvah that he had to do, even at the expense of something as basic, as essential as having water to survive on. Nobody at that time, hardly anyone, knew of a single Dvar Torah or a special message from Rabbi Levi Yitzchak. Rabbi J.J. Hecht was interviewed on the radio, and they asked him, who was the Rebbe's father? And he said, I don't know. And they said, so what's special? And he said that his father, Rabbi Shia Hecht, the original Shia Hecht, about 100 years ago, he was a balabas, a very Chassidish Yid in America, a businessman. And he was at a specialist doctor. And that doctor needed certain treatment or tests. This consultant at the end said, okay, thank you very much. You're finished. You're now released. So he said, how much do I owe you? So the doctor said, I don't take money from rabbis. So Rabbi Shia was a very honest person of integrity. He said, I'm not a rabbi. So the doctor said, a man who has 6 sons who are rabbis, by me, he's a rabbi. And you wouldn't take a penny from him. Yankel Hecht told that story on the radio, and he said, I don't know anything about the man. He had a son like the Rebbe. Then he's everything. That means that he is the tops you could ever dream to be in the world. And that was what people knew. And in a sense, you go back to it, even today, that's what you can realize. But today we also have in Tam B'das hundreds, thousands of teachings of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak. And from time to time, they're made more accessible. A lot of Hasidim that are working on this, people like Rabbi David Dubov and Rabbi Pesach Shmuel, Rabbi David Feldman worked on this thing. The other people, Rabbi Zellickson's giving over memoirs, whatever. You can access today teachings of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak. Now, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak.
Rabbi Lou, thank you very, very much. We'll get back to you later in the program.
Because I got some more to say. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure we have a long night ahead of us.
I'm looking forward.
So, speaking about Rabbi Hecht, Rabbi Yankel Hecht, we have here his nephew, the Rebbe Shliach in Eilat, who was, firstly, we would like to thank him very much. It's right now around 1:30 a.m. in Eretz Yisrael. And it was very kind of Rabbi Hecht, as well as Rabbi Shmuel Grezman, who will be joining us shortly, to join us today and share with us their memories and their times that they were in 770. So without further ado, we would like to ask Rabbi Yosef Hecht to share with us a little bit about his experience, Chafaf by the Rebbe, and its applicant signs. Rabbi Hecht.
Shalom to everybody, the panel, the listeners. Talking about the Chafaf, it's only natural to say that years ago, we knew a lot less about the Chafaf than we do during the duration of the years. One thing, all the Bochrim knew, even the Borgi Yeshiva Ktana, Bar Mitzvah age, and so on. When the Chafaf, there was a special feeling when it came Chafaf. Not like so much Yom Tovim, which was, of course, a special. We're going into Yom Tov, what the Rebbe is going to be with us Yom Tov. But, like, it's this Rebbe's Zach. The world doesn't know that much. Chassidim didn't know that much, but it's the Rebbe's Azach, the yahrzeit of his father. Remember, they knew the Rebbe. So to go in and to be by the davening, to go early, to have a place to be able to hear the Rebbe's davening, there was a special push, and Chofov, like more than the days doing. The Bochum, young Bochum used to say, "Wait, Chofov is coming, so we're waiting for the big Chassidim of the Rebbe to come." Even they're over town, the Chassidim, by everything. There's the Dora Shvi, and everything is the Rebbe, and the Rebbe, not. Those Chassidim come to the Rebbe for Chofov. Everybody knew, just for example, Geshem Mendel Gerelik. He was always came into 70 Chofov. And there's a feeling of iskashrus that one has at Prav in the Chofov together with the Rebbe. There was a special feeling of iskashrus that in the Rebbe's protis dikazach, and he shares it with the Chassidim on this day, not even of the year. The Rebbe also didn't see that it was revealed too much of the life of his Torah and so on in the first years. I don't know, I can't say, it wasn't there so much, but there was a certain feeling that not everything, the Rebbe didn't tell everything about his life. Over the years later, many years came more and more that the Rebbe told stories about the Rebbe. He told stories about the Rebbe Tzedakana. And like in later laments and in the Memim, you heard a lot more. The Rebbe took the crowd much more into his life with his parents, the Rebbe and the Rebbe Tzedakana, which of course made all of this for us. But then, in those earlier years, I feel that it was less. Not chas v'shalom in the regesh of the Chassidim, like I said, this is a day of iskashas. This is a day we the Chassidim of the Rebbe, of this door, the Chassidim of the Rebbe, we sit by his Farbrengen Chofov and we chazer Torah that the Rebbe speaks Chofov and we listen to the davening of Chofov. Of course, that was there. I'm saying, as to know how much more about it, I don't know. I know there was a time that the Rashad upstairs by the Sudas, when those years when the Rebbe used to eat the Sudas upstairs in the house of the Friedrich Rebbe, until the Simchas Torah Lamed Aleph. There were times that Rashad asked the Rebbe what was by you, what was by the father, what was in your house, and there were many times that the Rebbe said, "It's not everything you have to say." There was not the Rebbe. Not always was he willing to give information. But of course, over the years, it became much more. It started into being bashit, much more. With all the stories that started about Rebbe Tzedakana after her istalkas, after she passed away, and I think the first time that the Rebbe mentioned that the sforim of his father was, if I'm saying maybe I'm a mistake, but I think so. It was Chofav Chav Zayin. It was Shabbos, and the Rebbe said Amayim Avo Yekev Tishmon, and then the Rebbe said that there's the same. He said Levayer the Inyan wenn es verstehen durch was es steht in der Gos von dem Taten bei der Jortzeit auf dem Tanja, was ist gewesen bei Shevig Sachjorn und letztens das Mano Achren ist es herausgekommen. So that was the first of the Rebbe who shared, I think, with Chassidim, the Torah of his father in Pchinas that's in Hagos and Tanya, and it was in Russia B'Shevi, and then we got out some of the book with other books that we got out. Yes, so. And the Rebbe kept it even then a few years because he printed that Sefer Hecht and Tov Shelamet for the Chavod Yud Chav of Tov Shelamet. But in Tov Shen Chav Zayin, in the Maimon of Yekev Tish, when he quoted already what it said there, saying that it recently was revealed. And then the time came more, and this other form of the Rebbe came out. And the Rebbe started putting in the Torah of Rabbi Leivik into the Mamorim when he used to mention all the Rabbeim. He used to mention all the Rabbeim, B'Kavona. And I don't remember exactly which year. It could have been very, very close to Tov Shalom, maybe it was Lamed Aleph, Lamed Beis, Lamed Gimel. But then all of a sudden the Chassidim heard, and I know the way I feel, other people feel, a certain tremble went over us when we hear the Rebbe really quoting this Sforim from his father, the Biyurim of his father, Behemshech to the Rabbein. It was like a certain Emun of Felis Aleim. That's what I felt. It was like, this is a new Isgalus. This is a new Isgalus of the Rebbe, bringing Rabbi Leivik into Das Mamorim, to the Nigunim afterwards. Nigunim. It was something very, very, very special. And we know that Yud Shvat Tovshin Yud Aleph, the Rebbe did not mention the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid when he mentioned all the Rabbeim. And he said later, why? Weil ich hab Meule gehabt. Weil das nicht gewinnt, the Friedrich, beim Friedrich Rebbe. In the Maimer. Exactly the words that he said, but Meule gehabt. And the Maimer afterwards, Sheves Beganim, from Tovshin Yud, from Yud Gimel Shvat, he put in Baal Shem Tov. So you see how the Rebbe is so careful who to mention in the Maimer of Yud Shvat and how to say it. Baal Shem Tov and the Magid, the Rebbe looked at Meule gehabt. And here all of a sudden the Rebbe comes and the Rebbe puts it Rabbi Leivik, the Torah Zaina together. This is Galus Atzuma. A good Be'edika, his Galus, together with the Achaka, with the same with the Nigunim. And then what happened, you know that the Rebbe started being Masbir. What I'm trying to bring out is how the Rebbe brought us closer and closer to bringing the Inyan for Rabbi Zaintat Rabbi Leivik, a part of Chassidim. A part of Chassidim, a part of Ispashas Chassidus, Dr. Rabbi and Mendel, that became a part. It wasn't something that you can deny anymore. It became a Golitic problem, and that was a big, big thing. Very, very big, which was maybe a lot of people who were maybe older who opened up their big eyes. They were very, very surprised, but they see that that's what the Rebbe did. And then you know also that when did the Rebbe, on Tovshin Lamed, you know, Tovshin Chavtes, the Rebbe printed out special Gersa Tshuva. The Rebbe started Biurim from Tishrei Tovshin Chavtes and via the Holy Gersa Tshuva. And he finished it before Chavav Tovshin Lamed. And then it was Punkt Ashkocha Protis, so the Rebbe made it that way, that the Tanya, Hagos of Rabbi Leivik and the Tanya were printed, came out, Lekovit Chavav Tovshin Lamed. And then the Rebbe said, Bibat has been getting to get us a tshuva, and says, yes, Aroiski kum, and the Agos for them Taten, the Agos of my father came out. And the Taina, so we'll continue with learning from my father, the Agos, and he gets a tshuva, as a hemshach to the learning of he gets a tshuva, as a hemshach to that. And then the Rebbe, you know the word, and that went on till another about 8 months. I think it was either Tzav or Shemini Lamed Aleph, that the Rebbe finished the last beer, the last Hagah of Rabbi Leivik and the Tanya. And then came the big, what's surprise? What is the Rebbe? Is the Rebbe going to continue speaking this? Going to look something else? Because what is the Rebbe going to speak? He finished all the Hagahs and the Tanya. And he finished the Gersa Tshuva. What is there a special thing that the Rebbe is going to talk about by the Fabrengens? And there was a lot of tension. I think it was Shmini, as the first time, that everybody's waiting. After the Rebbe went, after davening, I remember I went to look upstairs to see the Americans if the Rebbe gave out a sefer. What is he going to talk on? What is he looking at? And then it was downstairs. We saw the son of Rabbi Chadukov, Shalom Yisrael. He's the one who used to bring down every time before the Fabrengen the Chumash that the Rebbe talked down for the Rashi from Kafei. And he brought down, and we saw that he brought down together with the Chumash the Lekuti Levi Yitzchak Kafsei. So this we saw that the Rebbe is not stopping with being Masbir, the Agos of the Rebbe, because he could have said until now as a part of the Gersa Tshuva. It wasn't so much that Rebbe is bringing his fathers into the Fabrengens, his father into the Torah of the Fabrengens. No, it's like part of he could have said that way, that it's a part of the Gersa Tshuva. No. As soon as he walked, see the way he walked out and put on the Rebbe's table, you know that the Rebbe is Bachadish. Another thing, that when his Fabrengens, and we all know what the Rebbe's Fabrengens mean. The Rebbe's Fabrengens mean oil. His oil, a Torah was made in the Welt. The ganze Welt is Yonik Chayes from the Rebbe's Fabrengen, from the Gili Torah of the Rebbe's Fabrengen. It says that over border, no chassid takes that away. The ganze Welt leapt from the Rebbe's Fabrengens. The learner. But in the Welt, even they don't know the Sikh, the Makif and everything. And here the Rebbe's Machlis, they are making a part of this Hamshocha of Gili Elokus that the world needs now to live with and so on. Part of that is my Tatis Haoris, the Haoris of the Levi Yitzchak. Both in Kavua, in a way that a permanent way, that every Fabrengen, every time the Rebbe comes out, and the Rebbe comes out as there's a Hamshocha Chadosh and Alo Elamis, and Alo Seder Shtalshlos, and he's talking, an integral part of that is his father's Torah. This you can't get anything with. This is was the declaration, how Rabbi Leivik is an integral part, not only of Chassidim, but an integral part of the Gilead Elokus Bechlal in the ganze Welt. That's the way I look at it. I imagine that other people look at it the same way. And I think it came to be Tui. I don't remember exactly which year Chof, but one of the years that he was talking about the Aliyas was Gated of the Neshama in Ayin von a Yortzeit. The Rebbe said specifically, und danach ist Gufa Bossa Reisha Ozel. He said it clear on Leivik. Gufa Bossa Reisha Ozel. Meaning, Gufa is not Elohim, but we as the Rebbe, we're all part of the Rebbe. We're all a chilik from the Rebbe. So that means the Gufa that's Chassidim. And the Gufa that's from the generation, the ganze Dor. The ganze Dor is Bossa Reisha Ozel. It was like maybe the Chotemet. The final Chotemet ever said that Chof of is a Yom Kloli von Amshocha von Chassidus Chabad durch das Rabbeim geben uns die ganze Zeit und für ganz Klal Yisrael und für Klal Yisrael and for the whole world. This was, I think, that was the biggest gilui that the Rebbe talked about. What is the nifla, the hafla of Chof of, and how Chassidim should start how to look at it, and how to know what they were talking about whom we're talking about. The Rebbe gave a chotemet when he brought out the Lekut Yitzchak. This is a part of Fabrengens. This is a part of the Amshachas of Elokus that go into the world. And this is Gufa. When it comes to Yortzeit, there's Gufa, Bos, Reish, Ozel. So Chassidim, you should know what you're talking about. Because even then, I don't believe that Chassidim really knew the God, knew who Rabbi Leivik was. Even the Chassidim were around him. Chassidim were with him. I don't know. Maybe I'm saying something that's maybe not totally correct. But that's the feeling is that no one really knew who Rabbi Leivik was. What is a godless and terrible? And this the Rebbe took on b'meshech hazman is megalet more and more, and that's why it became Chof became Chassidim. This is a part of Chassidus as a chiddush for Rebbe. As a part of Amshachas, we all know the Baal Shem Tov macht Amshachas in Welt, and the Magid Amshachas in Welt, and the Rabbeim. This is not only Amshachas in Welt. The Kiba Welt. The Welt stands and the Chassidus. The Welt stands and the Rebbe's Fabrengens where he talks. And it's become a part that the world standing also is there. Rabbi Leivik is there.
Shekayach Rabbi Hecht. When you were a Bacher, you were Zeicha to be part of the Chayzer team. To work together with the Chayzer Rashi, Rabbi Elkan. One of the central themes of the Chof of Fabrengens was the Hadron. The Rebbetzin one time told Reb Zalman Garari that the night before that Rebbe says the Hadron, if it was Vav Tishrei or Chafam, whatever it was, the Rebbe walks back and forth with Svardim and invests in tremendous amount of keiches to prepare the Hadron. So since you were Zeicha to prepare the Rebbe's Torah, the Hanachos, the Chulu, I would like to ask you if you can tell us a little bit about the concept of a Hadron, preparing it as a likud, to prepare it in the Kutasichas, which was later printed in. If you can tell us a little bit about that.
What I could say is that I don't know. I don't know if we could say that we separate between the hadronim that the Rebbe made Chof on the Yortzeit, or hadronim that the Rebbe made on Yud Shvat, or hadron that he made in the whole year of Tafshich Chafei by every Vochadik of Fabrengen. The Rebbe made a hadron because the Shnas Avelos. To start with, to say that we can Adkidekar go into Dakiyot, that there's different things, different gangen in the hadron. That I don't know. I don't know how I could say that. But you know, the hadron of the Rebbe was a hafo. The shilas that the Rebbe asked were shilas. He asked us beast. The shilas that are shilas. Sometimes shilas pshutim b'yesir, like the Rebbe was saying in the Rashi. The klotz kasha, the ben chomish to be gefrekt. There were times that were shilas that everybody learns Gemara. Ask the shaila and really doesn't see a clear answer, not in Rashi or not in Nesius. And the Rebbe, the Gala, the way to be mistat, to look at it, the way to make the way to look at what the Gemara is saying now, that the kashas stop being. I remember clearly in Menachos what the Rebbe made, and in Chachamtainis what the Rebbe made, and all the Avodah Zorah it's a kiston. The shyness that is so in that we really even finished learning the Gemara, you don't really have a good understanding in that word. So you see how the Rebbe touched the Zachin and opened it, like it says, you put in a new ore, you put in an ore, and all of a sudden the ore spreads out all over, everything becomes understandable. So that's another border that the way the Rebbe had run and that the Rebbe made. So the way he learned, is Pashut Chidushim. You can't find it anywhere. You can't find such tirutzim. You can't find such explanations and the way of looking at it. And the same is true with Kimuvan, with the meaning of Chafov, mentioned the years that the Rebbe made the Hadronim, and Chafov, the one in said. So these are things that are Pashut. It was as damnus by the Hadronim that Rebbe gave to be megalim to the world, a new way of learning. New way of learning Gemara, and new way of opening your eyes to what's bemis steckt in the Gemara.
And how often would the Rebbe be magia those hadronim?
This started later. I already left on shlichus from the Rebbe to Eretz Yisrael. We were sent in Tafsham Zayin, and I think that most of these things were printed before. I don't remember the hadron on the Rambam that the Rebbe made in Tafsham Zayin. I don't remember if it came out Muga before I went or I went afterwards, but most of the other ones came out Muga b'meshach of the years later. Some of them came out while I was still there. But of course, the Menichim and the Vada Fotzasichas looked very often in a Parshas Shavua where we can make a connection to the Hadron that the Rebbe said, and put the Hadron in as part of Pasuk Shavua. No, it was a wanted sicha. If you could get it to the Rebbe, should be magiyit, and we know that we're still understanding it right. Because a lot of times with that Hadronim, afterwards there was a certain not clarkite, not clear what the Rebbe meant. So of course he used to ask questions. That's questions. The Rebbe sometimes answered, most of the time he answered, either b'ksav or the answer. But when you have to put it out on paper to teach it with somebody else, you have to make sure that everything is clear. So there was always a rotzen to put a hadron in one of the shorim of Parshas, Parshas HaShavua, to be able to see that we'll have a gelegenheit, will be zoiche, that the Rebbe will be magia, a hadron of his that he made, which is a special type of thing for the ganze Welt, as it is. There are people in the world who would like to hear from the Rebbe a hadron of Hecht and Shas. It speaks to them differently than maybe a Pshat and Rashi. Not be everything is the same. Everything is Gidei Chachmosri Ein Sof Shel Kadosh Baruch Hu. But for other people, so there's always a gelegenheit. So I think that most of them came out after I already left on Shlichus there, so I was less up to date, although there were some that were before I left.
Thank you very, very much. I understand it's 1:45 in the morning by you now, so we hope you can stay around, but if you can't, we definitely understand.
Rabbi Shmuel said he has what to say. I want to sit here and hear what Rabbi Shmuel has to say. That sounds interesting.
We're definitely looking forward to getting back to Rabbi Lou.
And Rabbi Shmuel Grezman, of course. They know a friend of Shmuel Grezman. So.
Moving on in Eretz HaKodesh, we have with us Rabbi Shmuel Grezman, the Manal of the Sefer Torah Klali for the Yaldi Yisrael, and a Yid which was Zeicha to be by the Rebbe for many, many years, Chafav, and surely he was the Ma'argan of the Kines HaShluchim in Eretz HaKodesh, starting from, if I'm not mistaken, Tafshin Lamed Tes, and as well as the Siyum Sefer Torah for children, which was in Tafshin Mem Beis, both in Chafav. So, without further ado, Rabbi Shmuel Grezman.
Where do you want to start? The Kines HaShluchim or the Sefer Torah?
We'll start with the Kines HaShluchim. That was earlier. Thank you. Tell us how that began in general, the Shluchis.
The Shluchim was Yotesh Kislev Tafshin Lamed Vav. The Rebbe said that he feels a need to send two groups of Shluchim to Eretz HaKodesh, one to Tzvas and one to Yerushalayim, for the purpose of building and strengthening the country, but Gashmis or Baruchnis, Gashmis by living there, And Ruchni is doing in the Mefzoim, the Rebbe's in Yonim. It took a while, the conditions of what the shlichus was without all the details. In Yud Shvat, Tovshin Lamed Vov at the Fabrengen, the Rebbe said that's going to be the Preda, the Zegnenzich by the Fabrengen. And we left Yud Aleph Shvat, Tovshin Lamed Vov, and arrived in Eretz Yisrael in Yud Beis Shvat. A year later, the Rebbe sent another group, Tovshin Lamed Zayin. And a year later, after that, the third year, Tovshin Lamed Ches sent another group. In Tovshin Lamed Tes, usually was in the time of Shvat that the Rebbe announced it. He didn't say anything about another group, and he stopped sending. He sent three groups: Lamed Vav, Lamed Zayin, Lamed Ches. Tovshin Lamed Tes, there was shluchim between themselves, together with Shmuel Amovsky, decided that we're going to make a kenes. All the shluchim that live in Eretz Yisrael, aside from Yerushalayim, aside from Tzvas, and that was before all the shluchim started getting his stadus proti. That wasn't until the letter of Rosh Chodesh Shvat Tavshin Lamed Tes, so the Rebbe said, now that you've carried out the shlichus from Kloli, now is the time to start from proti. So the shluchim got together in a shul in Tzvas for Shabbos, Tavshin Lamed Tes. There was no, and the report was given, I don't think they ever sent anything then. Tavshin Mem, there was no kinus, and Tavshin Mem Aleph, we decided to make again a kinus. This time we made it in Migdal Emek in the yeshiva, only for men. That was what was decided to make it Tavshin Mem Aleph. At the Fabrengen was Shabbos Vayakel. With that's when that was the week of after Vayakel. That was the kenes. The Rebbe spoke of Fabrengen, says since it's a Shnas Hakel, a Noshim V'Tav, so the kenes that's going to take place tomorrow in Eretz Yisrael should include men, women, and children. Anoshim V'Tav, which is also what the Rebbe said was when he sent the shluchim, he also sent Anoshim V'Tav, all three kvutzes. So of course we had to get organized, and at Tavshin Mem Aleph at the Fabrengen, the Rebbe spoke a long sikha, which he was later Magia, which is printed about shlichus, and that's when that was the first kenes that Rebbe was Messiachis by the Fabrengen, and also sent a telegram before Shabbos to the kenes. Tavshin Mem Beis, the kenes took place Yud Beis Tammuz, around Yud Beis Tammuz time, and Tavshin Mem, and the Rebbe sent. That's when the Rebbe first sent a letter to Kol Mishtatvim B'Kenes HaShluchim B'Eretz HaKodesh. The interesting thing, different, that point stands out from the letters to the Kinusi HaShluchim is the Rebbe took the invitation. We sent an invitation that the kenes will take place in this place and this date, and the Rebbe was Messiachis to the details of what it said in the invitation, bringing a data from the Magid, that everything that you look at is like looking in a mirror, which is supposed to be a rom, and you have to take a ro from every prat, and Rebbe took a ro from every prat that was mentioned in the noisa of the kenes, and the time of the kenes, and the place of the kenes. That was at Tavshin Mem Beis. Tavshin Mem Gimel, we decided to make it around Chof Ov. And from then, the kenes was always on the day of Chof Ov, or a day before, a day after, and later it turned out the Shabbos B'Smichas to Chof Ov. And all of those letters, it always said that the kenes is taking place B'Smichas L'Chof Ov, which is Yeh Mishtalkes from the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Goyen, Rabbi Choser, Rabbi Kubel. That went on. That was the title. Derech Agav, mentioning before, the Rabbi Hecht was saying about the Rebbe said Guf of Basaresha. So that went on. The letters went on. The title of the Rebbe's father, although the Rebbe was not Messiachis in the letter to us, from the title of the Rebbe's father's name, or the Rebbe's father was not mentioned. It was just the room where the kinnis was taking place. Tavshin Nun, we add because of I think was something connected with David Nachshon, with the cave of the Rebbe's father, where he added the word Kvei Kedushas. So in the invitation, the words that was put in was given to the Rebbe was written Kvei Kedushas, and that went through. I think also in Likutei Sichos and different places, letters that Rebbe, the word, the Kvei Kedushas was added to the Rebbe's, to the title of the Rebbe's father. In Tafshin Nun Aleph, for whatever reason, somehow it was written into the Nusach that was given in, the word Admor was added. But the Rebbe took out side the Admor, side the Kvei Kedushas from that letter, in the letter that he sent us. Nevertheless, I think in different places, in Rashi, in Sichos, or in Likutei Sichos, it still continued the Lashon Kvei Kedushas. That's the Kinusim, Hashluchim that started then, the first Kinus that started, Lametes and Mem Aleph and Mem Beis, was in the Fabrengen, I think, of Tafshin Mem Gimel, or Mem Dalid, I think the Rebbe said, as Mizdav Mezenzel, as Echid Dozol, and Machan as Akenis, that also here, a kenes should be made, similar to the kinusim of the Shluchim Eretz HaKodesh. That's when the kenes of the United States and Canada started. Then a few years later, the Rebbe, I think by the kinusim was only United States and Canada. It was, I think, Tafshin Mem Ches. I'm not sure. Correct me, someone that's listening. The Rebbe said to make an international kenes. And then at the international kenes, there was also women came. I think because of Shnas Hakel, or the year after Tafshin Mem Tes, women came because of the first yahrzeit of the Rebbetzin. And then the Rebbe said they should make a special tochnit for the women, or they should, or something, I don't know the exact dates. And then it turned into a Bazunder Kenes for the women at a different date, the Smichas to Chav Beis Shvat. So the Kenes, the Kinusim from all over the world, and the international Kenes all started from the Kinus of Eretz HaKodesh. Talking about the starting of the Kinus of Eretz HaKodesh, in Tafshin Mem Tes, after the Kenes, and we sent in a duch of the Kenes, at the end of the good, the Rebbe answered, the brach, I think, was the nusach of that was kavua then, and the Rebbe said to put out an album, I'm not sure the Lashon, an album of the Kenes. So we sat down and tried to figure out what the album is supposed to look like and what it's supposed to be. And we decided we're going to make a history of the shlichus and have drushes and speeches that all the shluchim spoke, or to write Chidushei Torah. We had a question that we wrote to the Rebbe, and we didn't get an answer to it. The question was, should we also put in pictures of the families of the shluchim? The question was, because it's families, it's men, women, it's a Kevitz Teroni, and there was no answer until the Kenes HaShluchim and Tafshin Nun, with the Kenes HaShluchim Eilami, that the Rebbe said then to put out an album, and there he said that the Rebbe said that they should put in the pictures of the families, and the families that are not here, or the Shluchim not here, should send in the pictures. So that was an answer to us also to put in the pictures. It took a while until we got everything together to get until you get pictures, until you get articles, until you get this. And the Rebbe was on top of it and had expressed very strongly, where is the album? Soon is going to be the Kenes. And this is not the hurry up with the album. The album came out, and the Rebbe mamish before the Kenes. The Rebbe was happy with the album, and when the album went in, he said he wants another album from the Kenes of that year. And so, again, the first album that the Rebbe asked for was from the Shluchim in Eretz HaKodesh.
The Sefer Shluchim printed in New York was a hemshich from it?
It was a hemshich of Tafshin Nun. The Tafshin Nun was a small one, and then the Rebbe said to make a hemshich of the one of Tafshin Nun, which was a hemshich, probably a hemshich. But the first, hemshich, but Pashtas, the first album the Rebbe said was in Mem Tes, to the Shluchim in Eretz HaKodesh.
Yeshakayach Rabbi Grezman, we would like to hear about the first Siyum Sefer Torah for children in Tafshin Mem Beis, but I would like to go back to Rabbi Lou. It's getting late in London as well. Rabbi Lou, you were zeicha for many years to participate in a fabrengen, which the Rebbe's mother, Rabbi Tzachana, would host in her apartment, first on Lincoln and down on President Street. And I don't know if it's too known even that she would host fabrengens 2 to 3 times a year. Since you were Zeicha to be there for a few years, if you can please share with us how the scene looked there. Rabbi Lou.
The background from my point of view was the first time I visited England, the Rebbe sent me, I was a chosen. He told me, you're going as a chosen, but you have to go and speak somewhere. And while I was here, Rabbi Ben Zion Shem Tov gave me a package to deliver to the Rebbetzin Chana. I was here for Beis Nissen, Tov Shin, Chav Gimel. And I went to Reb David Raskin, Hello Shalom. I arrived Yud Aleph Nissen in the morning. It was a Friday, Tov Shin Chav Gimel. And I arrived at Seder Chassidus. The flame was going through the night or something. And I said, I have something here for the Rebbe Chana. Can I give it to you? Because Reb David was known as the person who was like the Gabbai. He was the one in charge of our schedule and everything else. And he told me something which I never knew. And he said, it's Yud Aleph Nissen. There's a group of Chassidim that go to visit her every year on Yud Aleph Nissen, which I never knew about. And you come with, you give it to her direct. You were given a package to deliver it straight to her. And I went, it must have been about 11 o'clock in the morning. There was certainly less than a minyan. Elter Chassidim. Vice bed, it was Reb David, he was the youngest person, plus me, a bacha. And sat around there, and the Rebbetzin had little liqueur, like Benedictine, and people said, L'chaim, mit ungewünschen dem Rebbe, and I gave her the thing. She asked me about England, she asked me about my Mechutonim, the etc., etc., and they spoke about the Rebbe. That year, after the Chasana, we went straight to England 2 days after the Chasana. The Rebbe said it's a shlichus, and I traveled around here. I was here for about a month after the Chasana, including Chof Ov. We made a Fabrengen. I was in Manchester. We made a Fabrengen. We had about 20 young people there. Then the next year came Yud Aleph Nissen. So I asked Reb David, can I join again? I'm here already. I'm Mishtikol Kircha. I don't know how often they went. I just know that they went Yud Aleph Nissen and they went Chof Ov. So I went to Yud Aleph Nissen. Then there was the famous story when the Rebbetzin said, L'chaim, em soll sein gut. That was that story. And I was there Chof Ov in the summer.
I'm sorry, can you, Rabbi Luke, can you say that story?
Yes, okay. It's a story which happened then, and I held it in myself. I'm ashamed to say that was the relationship with the Rebbe. I didn't write personal things in, but I wrote this into the Rebbe, Yud Nissen, L'kras Yud Aleph Nissen, Tovshin Nun Aleph, and Rabbi Grona told me that it came out with a whole pile of Shachal HaBrochis, Avochem Avochecha, thanking you for the brochis. But on this one, the Rebbe also added Chuas Chayin Ala Protim Shekosav. So the Protim was as follows. While they were saying L'chaim, the Rebbetzin Chana led the field. So she said, L'chaim, em soll sein gut. Those are the words. It should be good for him. That's what she said. One of the Elter Chassidim, Choshev Yid, commented, I know what you mean. Sometimes you want to give a bracha and you cannot focus on a specific bracha. There are like so many different things, so you give a kololistic bracha, which is so sein gut. And the Rebbetzin Chana smiled, and she says, in this case, I meant this as the specific bracha. Das is the bracha protis. Em soll sein gut es kumtem. She added 3 words. Es kumtem. He deserves it. It should be good for him. He deserves it. That's the story. And then I wrote that into the Rebbe. That Pesach, a young man here who called me his mashpia, so he asked me, what can you think when the door opens up for Eliyahu Novi? What's can metrachten? That you only have a few seconds to think. I said, think em soll sein gut. Those words. Because as em wird sein gut, wird allem sein gut. because the Rebbe's entire Masa HaNefesh is for us, for Klal Yisrael, for the world, for Mashiach. That's what it's all about. So anyway, that was the story on Yud Aleph Nisan. Somehow or another, I don't know how I found out that a Chof Of, they were also going. Chof Of, there were more, we weren't sitting around the table. These sitting around the tables were in the morning, like about probably 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, 1418 President Street, in that room. It was a small table, smaller than the table I'm sitting at here. And everyone sat around it. There was probably about 6, 7, 8 people. And Chof Of, there were more people. This was in the evening, about 6, 7 o'clock. I think it was maybe it's even 8 o'clock. It was a hachana to the Rebbe's Farbrengen. That was Shnas HaEsrim. Maybe it was just because it was that year. And that year the Rebbe introduced the Inyan of Keren Levi Yitzchok. It was the 20th year. And just before that Farbrengen, or maybe a couple of hours, but I remember it was dark. It was like in the evening. And my memory is not 100% clear about the context, about all the people around, but I think there must have been a good 15, 20. It was like an oilam standing there. And the Rebbetzin was Farbrengen, and she was talking about her husband, Levi Yitzchok. And she spoke about the poverty that was there, about the Histalkus. She went Proteus about the Histalkus, and about all the people that were involved, the Rabinowitz and the Raskins, all these different people, how it was that they got linen, was like a miracle, all the different things that happened. She went, discussed all about that day of Chof Tovshin Dalet. This is Tovshin Chof Dalet, 20 years later. Then we were already going out, because by that time I was closer to her. We were like the little alcove to go out of the apartment, and she reflected a powerful, powerful message. Now I must say that 6.5 weeks later she passed away. And I went to her I went quite a few times, and she stopped me in the street sometimes and spoke. But this is the last time that I heard her talk, because I went to England for a chasana that summer, and then I came back and I went to Greenland. Whatever this was it. And she said the following. I witnessed a lot of great Gedolim, Rabbonim. My tata, her father, Rebbe Shlomo, was a great man. Mit my man in this Gewen was to shamen sich. And was nothing to be ashamed of with my husband. In other words, he was also a great man. And each of them, at the tables where I was the daughter and the wife, there were visitors who were always coming, who were of the top echelon, the top notch of Gedol Yisrael, people who came from Klal Inyanim. So she said, I've seen Gesehen Asach Größe. Aber Asach Größe, wie der Sohn soll gesund sein, habe ich nicht gesehen. She said, somebody is great as my son, the Rebbe soll gesund sein. She wasn't talking like a mother. She was talking like a chassid. And she said, the Iker, what's so great? Why is he different than all of the others? She said, the main thing is, etrokt gadlus mit a pashtus. He carries his greatness with a simplicity. He combines greatness and simplicity. And then a few weeks later, we had this terrible shock, and she passed away on Vov Tishrei. And then Pashas Noach, the Rebbe started the gift to Klal Yisrael of Rashi Sichos, which went on from Noach until Bereshis Tavshel Chavav. Then later on, Mishpatim, it was renewed again, but it was originally a thing for 1 year, and the Rebbe constantly, especially over that year, but you see all the years, whenever the Rebbe spoke on Rashi, the Rebbe drew this parallel between Rashi is Ben Chomesh Lemikra, the Pashtus, and it also has in Yonim Mufloim from the Shalah, from other places, and how in Yonim and Halacha, different times the Rebbe always showed that there was an Amkus and the Pashtus, which was what was combined within Rashi. And I always thought, whenever I hear the Rebbe saying that, I was thinking of those words of the Rebbe Tzimchana on Chofov.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Lou.
Okay.
Can
I just say one more?
Yes, no problem.
I want to say something about Rebbe Yitzchak himself. These are all things that we saw and we experienced. You heard fantastic things from Rabbi Yosef Hecht and from Rabbi Shmuel Grezman. Things, some of them I didn't even see, and all of them are. We lived through these times, and you see the significance. One of the biggest things I saw is a hagor of the Rebbe in a sikha that they were about the Torah of his father, and how fortunate we are to have that, which we got because the Rebbe Tzimchana was Moshe Nefesh. She wasn't arrested. She wasn't sent in Golus. She could have, with good justification, stayed in one of the big cities and done his shtatlis to get her husband freedom, for example. She joined him and she took the Sfarim and they worked out how to make ink, etc., and he only could write Nekudis. He only had a handful of Sfarim and he quotes about 150 Sfarim there, daf by daf. And the Rebbe said many, many times in his sichos, the Tata did not have the ability. He didn't have the access to write at length as he would have liked to. He relied. Who did he rely on? It means that this whole thing was made for us. So now, who was this Rebbe Levi Yitzchak? He was a teacher. He was a teacher. He was a god. He was a manhig in all different types of situations. He made special services Yom Kippur in the morning for people who go to work on Yom Kippur. It was like a Chabad house, his house. At the same time as being the deepest chassidus, a person quoted in my Morim of the Rebbe and in Seder Negunim, all these things. That person was, and so the Rebbe writes in a Haggoy, in one of the Sichos, I think maybe in Tov Nun, it's one of the last years, that there were Alfei Boigin, there were thousands of folios. That means maybe 10,000, 15,000 pages. I don't remember the exact expression. There's thousands of pages of Torah of the Rebbe's father, which were written before, and we don't know where they are today. And we know that the Rebbe sent different shluchim. I know of someone, not under the communists, who the Rebbe sent and said to go to a certain cave, to search in a cave. And we're hoping and praying that it will turn up, and Ezras Hashem Halavai Haim, that this Torah of the Rebbe's father. So now the Rebbe's father was sent into Golus, to a place where they didn't expect him to survive physically, and with diseases, with malaria, with mosquitoes, with the people of illiterate and animals, all different types of things. In order to keep him away from Jews, he shouldn't be able to teach Jews. And he sat there and he wrote, and he had nothing to write on. And he wrote these notes. To me, that's the most inspiring part of the whole Rebbe Levi Yitzchak. There's some stories about how he got a sukkah with Chochmah, with Rebbe Tzimchana. He had a mes mitzvah. All the mitzvahs that he did with Mesiris Nefesh. But this abnormal person would say, never. I have good memories to fall back on. He said, I have a job. And that job is to be a manik, to lead the Jewish people. And I'm going to do it. I don't have to make ink. I have no pay. I have to write it smaller. And that they'll be mefarish. And that is a message for today. We are not manhigim. We are certainly not koi kedushasim. We're so far from anything. We're just little miniature, every one of us, every bocher that there is in the world, but you have your job. There's comes again in Tov Shin Pei that there comes suddenly We're imprisoned in a certain way. What's the prison? It's you can live off the fat of the lamb, but your whole normal schedule, your whole norm is totally overturned. So Rebbe Levi Yitzchak taught us that you have to think, what am I about? What's my tachlis? And then you innovate, you're creative, you find a way, and every one of us in this situation is an opportunity. Every time you see that you're locked down and you have either external Yetzer Haras or internal Yetzer Haras or things that, whatever it is, or just inertia, just atzvus or atzvus, whatever it is, and you start to think, what can I do anyway? This situation is forced on me. No situation is forced on you. You have a job, and you're the luckiest person. In this tkufa, this is the last tkufa before Mashiach, to be able to work out what is my job. And I'm going to do it. My job is 4 words. Soll sein gut. In other words, what does the Rebbe want? Not what the Rebbe want from himself, and what does the Rebbe What does the Rebbe expect of me, little tiny me, in my little tiny situation? I'm surrounded by people that don't understand. There's no ink, there's no this, there's no that. I'm a hader and kalaki v'chamura. But I have a job which I have to give to the world. What's stuff in Dihom? And that we should be doing. That's to me the message of Chav. Thank you for listening. I know that it's not what I was supposed to be saying now, but
you mentioned before Tafshin Chaf Hey. So just going back to then, until Tafshin Chaf Hey, in general, the Chassidim barely saw the Rebbe davening Shachris. Besides, until Memches, before I said Erev Shoshana. So how much more so that
Purim, Erev Shoshana, there was about 3 or 4 times a year. When he davened Fanomis.
Yeah, there's a few times a year that the Rebbe davened Shachris Chassidim before Chaf Hey. However, what was significant about Chafav is that that was one of the days that they saw the Rebbe being in the Chazan, serving Chazan. But my question is to you like this: did you look forward to Chafav to see the Rebbe leading the tefillas? Was there? Can you kind of like bring us back to those times, weeks leading up to Chafav, coming back early from America Shlichus? I think in general, Achrim went from Yubes Tammuz to Chafav, correct?
In Tafshin Chaf Hey, you mean?
In general, the Seder was from Yubes Tammuz to
Chafav. I know that. Yeah. But you're asking if there was a special dedication to the Rebbe's davening for Hanomer on Chaf Hey?
No, in general, not on Chaf Hey. In general, Chafav.
Yeah, definitely. It was very, very powerful. And then the Shabbos, I wasn't there Chav Gimel when the Rebbe sang Pe'er V'chovod to Shamil's Niggin. But the years I was there in Mendel, I was there in a lot of different years, including Shabbos, Chafav, very, very strong. B'chalal, when the Rebbe davened every day for Hanomer, the crowd wasn't that big. It was upstairs. It was packed, but it was, it was upstairs in the Zal most of the time. But Chafav, it was downstairs. It was it is a go'olam over there. I knew somebody from the Miri Yeshiva, a relative of mine, who used to come every morning by taxi. He should daven with the Rebbe's minyan. And I knew him. He was like not, And so I asked him, why do you come here to Lubavitch? He said, Ashkenaz, it's a whole business. He says, when the Rebbe davens, you can feel the Piresh HaMilish. You can feel the kavanah in every word that he says. He says he got Rebbe davened at a pretty steady pace. Well, that's slow. It was a steady pace, but you can feel he said he feels the power in every word that he says, and it helps his own kavanah. It's like a Litvish kind.
Interesting. Shekayach. All right. Just going back to Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Grezman, you were about to tell us about the first Siyum Sifetera for Yaldi Yisrael. Obviously, the Rebbe gave you the Yadaminoi on the Siyumim, and if you can please share with us about the first Siyum, Tafshin Membez.
The first Siyum was Tafshin Mem Aleph. The Sefer Torah, interesting about this mitzvah of Sefer Torah, which started with children, then later went over to adults, is the only mitzvah, the mitzvah that started on the Rebbe's birthday, Yud Aleph Nisan. When it came close to the Rebbe wanted, L'chatchila, he said it should be finished before the end of the year. The Siyum should be the latest Erev Rosh Hashanah, it's Shnas Hakel, the Beis HaKnesset Tzemach Tzedek. But when he kept pushing and he wanted it finished even before that, he wanted it finished before Yud Beis Tammuz. For Yud Beis Tammuz, but L'Peil was finished at the end of Tammuz. When 304,805 letters were sold, I think it was in the Chav Chei or Chav Vav Tammuz, I wrote the Rebbe that the letters are there. And then the preparations for the Siyum started. The Hatzah to make it on Chav Ov came from the Vad, from the Rabbanim, and Rabbi Yoslavsky was the one he called, or he spoke, or he wrote, that planning to make the Siyum on Chav Ov. And then somebody, one of the Ashkonim that was involved in the campaign, came up with an idea that said Chav Ov is middle of summer in the camps, everybody's in vacation and in the countries, they're not going to be able to be in the crowd. Let's wait in Chodesh Elul, when school starts, we'll be able to bring all the schools together. There'll be a lot more children. So Rabbi Yoslavsky sent that to the Rebbe, he called the Rabbi Chadakov, and he says, this is the way Yoslavsky says over, that he's pretty sure that the Rebbe was on the line, and he told the Savara to know the Chadakov, and on the spot, Rabbi Chadakov answers him, no, don't change it. It should be only on Chav Ov. The Rebbe wants it on Chav Ov, not to change it, not any. And after he came home later that night, or when he said, I think when Chadakov came home, or later on, he called Yoslavsky again, and he said, "Did you understand what you were told before, that the Rebbe wants it on Chav Ov, and it should be on Chav Ov and not change it back to Chav Ov?" So ever since that all the Siyum are Chav Ov, except for 1 year in the third Siyum Sefer Torah that it wasn't, the Sofrim were not finishing in time, so it was pushed off till, it was also a Shnas Hakel was pushed off to the end to Chodesh Elul. But L'Peil, the Rebbe wanted all the Siyumim on Chav Ov. The second Siyum Sefer Torah, which was a different question at the time, we also decided it should be on Chav Ov. And I wrote to the Rebbe that maybe the Siyum of the Achnasa Sefer Torah, of the second Sefer Torah, should be in the 770 of Kfar Chabad, because the Achnasas, that the Chanukah Sabayas was made Tezvav Tammuz of Tavshin Memvov right a month before the Siyum. So I asked the Rebbe, should we make it the way the first one was in the Tzemach Tzedek, or make it in 770 for Chabad? And the Rebbe underlined that it should be the way it was in the first Siyum Sefer Torah in the Tzemach Tzedek. And from them, all the Siyum and all the Sefer Torah in the Tzemach Tzedek. But the Siyum Sefer Torah, Chav Ov, Tavshin Memvov, the Rebbe sent a bottle of mashke, and he also sent Mitzur B'zeh Esrim Matbeas Shalhei Shkolim. And the Rebbe didn't say what the remez in that is, but the Leit Megeret, I looked at it that way, that it's talking about Esrim because it's Chav Ov, Hey, Chamishi Chum Shetera, the Rebbe mentioned with the stones on the certificate, and that Matbei of Hey Shkolim had a picture of a lion on it, which the lion I saw as Mazel Aryeh from Chodesh Menachemov. That's the
Shekeach Rabbi Grezman. Was there any other initiatives by the Rebbe throughout the years on Chav Ov when you were a Bacher in 770 in the Lameds, or I think it was Levi Yitzchak Library, it was Lamed Daled? that correct?
Whatever. That you have the library, you have the Tiferes Skein and Levi Yitzchak, which was
It was Tafshin
Mem. And did anybody mention the story here about you thought about the Rebbe's father when he was in Golis, and Mendel Raskin was taking care of him on Erev Tisha B'Av?
No, we didn't mention that yet. Maybe we'll get to that a little later.
I punked heard it today, the story again.
Please share it if you like to.
You want? Can I share it now? Do you have time?
Please.
1 minute. Mendel Raskin, in the last years, was together with the Rebbe's father, and he took care of him, and he helped him put on tefillin, and it was Erev Tisha B'Av.
It was with him, his father, and his brothers as well, and Tafshin Dalet and Alata, his whole family.
But this was a time. This was Erev Tisha B'Av. The Mendel Raskin was there, and it was late with Erev Tisha B'Av, and he helped, and he wanted to go home. And the Rebbe's father starts talking to him. He starts talking to him in Yanim and Teira. He doesn't remember what the Rebbe was talking. He doesn't understand. Doesn't remember when he told over the story. But the Rebbe's father just kept holding him up and telling him in Yanim and Teira, talking to him in Yanim and Teira, and talking and talking. Even the Rebbe in Chana told Rebbe Leivik, let him go home, let him eat. He has to eat. Before he has to eat before Tisha B'Av. And Levi didn't hear what she was saying, made any continued until Mamish, the last minute, he said, "Okay, you can go." And when he came home, they pushed it. He heard the simcha that was going on. The family said that what happened, that the army was here looking for you. And Bushet, they left Mamish right before you came, and it was clear that.
Did you notice certain hakaras hatev that the Rebbe had? Did you notice throughout the years when you were a bacher a certain hakaras hatev that the Rebbe had for those who were Mishamish's father?
It's pretty clear.
Was anything by the Chafaf bringings?
Huh? Not Chafaf bringings, but it's not people that the Rebbe was hakaras hatev to anybody that helped his father and helped his mother.
The Rebbe told him to say l'chaim at the Chafaf bringings. Mm-hmm. All right, moving on a little bit to the Tafshin Mems in the later years. We have with us the Rebbe Shleich in Minnesota, Rabbi Mendel Feller, who was gifted with a Baal Kishrein and a Bazikarin to please share with us various initiatives in Tafshin the Mems and the Nuns. In general of the Rebbe in those years, and as well as what was happening in the Rebbe's Chotzer in those years. The Gan Yisrael would come, in the yearly rally, etc. Whatever you can share with us, Rabbi Feller.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Peterson. Let's just start with what Rabbi Grezman was mentioning. We were talking about the Hakoras HaToiv in the late moon, in other words, the early moons. There was the Chassid of Yosef from the Moitin. We remember many times just what appeared to us like Stam, this is in the late moons and the early moons. The Rebbe would just call them up and give them a piece of cake in the middle of the Farbrengen. I'm sure it's recorded in the Yomanim, the exact dates that this happened, but it happened several times, to the extent that sometimes a younger Bacher would say, "Who's this guy?" He was just, he was, relatively, he was an elderly chassid, a yid, but he was, no one ever heard him give a speech in 770, no one ever heard him chassid amayma, and that wasn't in Yemen. He was living in the Shchuna, whatever. Actually, you could read it, there's a biography, he actually did write his zichronis, which it's not readily available somehow, and he actually, I believe, wrote in Russian, and it was translated. And he writes about some of the inyanim that he actually did and helped. But this Hakoras HaToiv was a clear Hakoras HaToiv that was Refanenu. And Abbas would say, "Who's this gentleman?" He'd say, "Oh, he was a person who helped the Rebbe's parents in Almaty." So that's just, I want to go over some of the things that were said, just to make a little dagesh on a few little stiklach of what we were talking earlier. And then we'll talk about Chafaf in the later years. Rabbi Hecht was talking about the Toshach of Zion when it was Pashas Ekev, and the Rebbe mentioned his father's Torah for the first time, and then it was again Tavshin Lamed or whatever. But if you learn now, and it's I even see now in our Morim, it's not always brought in our Mokim, but as we learn the Rebbe's Torah, and it's becoming more and more, I should say, I don't want to say it's more available, but it's a little bit easier to study because there's a series of.
Okay, Father, is there a way to fix the audio? It's a little unclear.
You don't hear that? I could tune in another thing, but I don't know if I could fix it.
People text me that it's hard to hear you.
Okay, I could. Anyway, so if you look in Rabbi Dubov was giving out the Rebbe's father's Torah more and more with Ha'aretz, etc. But as we learn that, I'm noticing that the Rebbe brought his father's Torah many times, not only implicitly, but it's just without an Armokim. And it was just in Tavshach of Zion where he said it expressly, but you find that the Rebbe's Torah is replete. And actually in Tavshach Lamed Tes, the Rebbe actually said that he doesn't have to mention that something is in the name of his father, just like it says the story of the Gemara, because what he learned from his father. I had the opportunity now to listen recently. I've heard other times to the Farbrengen in Tavshin Lamed Aleph of Chofav. The whole different than other Farbrengen, where the Rebbe starts out to speak about the merit of the day and the importance of the day, which is certainly something which in and of itself was the style of the Rebbe's father. He learned from the Rebbe's father. On Chofav itself, I don't want to use the word cut to the chase. But in that Farbrengen, he says it's not only to do a hadron, and to say Inyan and Nigla, and to connect the Inyanim. And the first three sikhas, the Rebbe seemingly connects separate things that we wouldn't see the connection necessarily. And the Rebbe says, Say Inyan Nigla that he took from his father's Torah, Say Inyan of a hadron from other Masechtas and for Shas. Then he takes the Inyan of he draws the analogy from Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel and finds one case in each one of the Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. Then he takes it and connects all the things together through the first three sikhs. It's a very different style of Farbrengen than a regular Farbrengen. And it's without even talking about the importance of the day. It's just cutting straight because it's a given that it's the Yortzeit of his father, and this is what he's going to share with us. The fourth sikha that ever starts a little bit more this year, then he goes into the Mi Yehudi. And even in the Mi Yehudi, he mentions some of the other Torah. It's a very long sikha, and it's actually a geschmacke. There's a lot of interesting Aussprachen there.
Which year are you referring to?
Tavshin Lamed Aleph. Here's the Rebbe was saying there about the Holy Land. He says it, and he smiles. You could hear that the Rebbe smiles in the middle. He says, Rabbi doesn't Kiyas and Sprachen, because he starts saying that the Umm also call it Yisrael the Holy Land. And he says it in English and Russian and Italian, and then he continues. But getting to what you were asking about, so in Chofav, Bochum already sometimes. Bochum was still usually in camp or Mekashlichs, but a lot of guys would try to make it their business to get back for Chofav in time. Or some people even were able to break away. I know I was in camp a couple of years, but I got away from camp in order to read for Chofav, especially when it was on Shabbos, Tavshim Gimel, Tavshim Zion. And when it was on Shabbos, it was a Moed, of course, the Moed because.
Dalet also, no?
What?
Tavshim Dalet?
Imam Dalet also was on Shabbos, correct, and Tavshinun. But the if like Bomer is Sunday, Chofav Shabbos, so you can know those years. It's easy. So Madach on a regular year with Lepol with the microphone playing with the tefillas, let's say upstairs, outside, and on the hookups. But so everyone pushed for a place anyway because you wanted to daven inside with the Rebbe and hear and see, etc. But on Shabbos, it was even a much bigger, let's just say, a shtupanish and a crowd with places and catching places, etc., etc. And was kvum and the whole hoo-ha. But it was so special to hear the Rebbe daven in the Musach on Shabbos Dik Musach. And Al Pirov, that's what the Rebbe did. And he did plain rain in Musach, not with Chazonish pitch of kiss, but with the regular Lubavitcher Nusach, like and he went through. There are people that know much better than I, but it was so special to hear my uncle, Zolzang Stark, mentioned that he wasn't there, but in Tavshachov Gimel, that was the time when the Rebbe actually sang Pe'er Rechovet to the Nigan of Shmuel, and that was a big gili that the Rebbe should do that, and just
middle of Shachris, the middle of Birkas Kirishman, the Rebbe started singing in Kil Adin.
Yeah. Pe'er Rechovet to Shmuel's Nigan.
Was it like a solo? Like the whole song happened listening to the Rebbe sing?
There was certainly a solo, because nobody sang alone. They listened to the Rebbe sang the whole thing. And there are people that were there that actually, there are not too many disagreements in how it was. There are a few diukim that some of the people who sing it over who were there, disagree on, but for the most part, it's pretty simple and straightforward. But it's amazing that on the yard side of his father, that's when the Rebbe shared in such an intimate way, such a special thing to connect and to be machaber the nigan of Shmuel with Pe'er Rechovet. And that was Dafkin on the yard side of his father. In the later years, the camps would actually join not only Gan Yisrael, the overnight camp, which came into New York, but also sometimes day camps from the area. There were a few day camps that would also come, and usually they had T-shirts, and they were readily identifiable. And what they did is, even though there was usually Mekayim Kvurim, but they made places, let's say, on the right side of the shul, the benches where the skating used to be, they would reserve for the camps, and then the Bochum and whoever else would stand around on the left side.
This was during Mincha?
During Mincha, the camps would be there, and there were years. I mean, I'm sure you can see this on video, where literally just like a daven in a camp, and they sing Ashrei. They sang Ashrei once, and also they sing Amin Yesh Merabah, Yesh Merabah.
While the Rebbe was Chazan, they would sing.
While the Rebbe was Chazan Chavot, and the Rebbe waited, and they sang Altira, and so there was and also.
Was there Eidos during the singing at all?
Yeah,
that was leading the
I'll tell you why. Because the Bachram got we were all nervous. You're singing Ashrei over there, Ashrei. This is the Rebbe's field. This is not camp. And we started, and the Rebbe he started to do that on the Stender, and then all bets were off. And they sang, and the same thing with Altira. I think even Aleinu, I think they sang the whole Aleinu, if I remember correctly. But this is recorded. You could hear this. But the general union of this was that they also attended the Farbrengen. And when they attended the Farbrengen, they were also sitting in T-shirts, and
before the Farbrengen, was there always a rally, Chafov?
Turn it on.
I think is it
before you get to the Farbrengen, was there a rally at all?
So you have to understand that when camp comes in several hundred children, they had to take care of them, to have supper, and they had to have this and that. So there wasn't a rally per se in 770. They had to say what they were doing. But there was Mincha, and the Farbrengen was 6 hours later. So the camp itself didn't Yom Ruchnim with them and whatever else they did. There was a year that there was a rally in association with Mincha. The camp usually had a rally, a special rally when they came, and this is a second thing, when after camp or the last day, when camp arrived back, then camp had a special rally, and it was usually to all the camps. They usually all arrived in the same day. Montreal and New York and even Detroit, if they were the boys second, whatever it was, and there were rallies then. And I believe there was on Chofov also once a raid to the camps. But at the Farbrengen itself, the Rebbe called on them to sing a nigun, to lead a nigun, and that's also recorded. There's even a video of it. So
Usually,
the Rebbe
was
B'chalal.
it Gunim or like camp songs?
What? So they actually started. I believe they started to Love a Fellow Jew, which is a camp song by all accounts. But nevertheless, sometimes
One year was Wake Up Yidden.
Wake Up Yidden, yeah. So the whole idea, the very idea of that this was a day that the Rebbe shared with Chassidim as a personal day. But not only that, the Rebbe took it and had us, the Rebbe said, anytime that Chassidim get together, it's a good thing. But what was the occasion? And what was the occasion? You know, Chassidim got together many times in the year. And here, the Rebbe did take the opportunity to speak of the Mesiras Nefesh of his father and use that in Hira. And the Rebbe did this even in Tovshin Yud before the famous, Yud Shvat Tovshin Yud Aleph. In Tovshin Yud, Chofav the Rebbe already verbring. That you could even hear in Tovshin Yud Aleph, there's already recording. And it really illustrates something very special. And when Chassidim were able to recognize, of course, we see this also in the biography of the Rebbe's father, which was written by a Yid called Rabbi Naftali Gottlieb. And really, he said the reason why he even wanted to give out this biography is because the Rebbe's father's farm started to come out, Tovshin Lamed. And then people looked at it, you see, murdered the Torah. And then the people asked, who was he? Where was he? People didn't know. There wasn't even a biographical sketch about him. So he had this idea, and he wrote it to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe never answered him. And he himself had never seen the Rebbe. He lived in Yerushalayim, and when he came for Kesher Bracha, I believe in Tov Shalom and Gimel, the Rebbe asked him, what's with the book? He says, he was in shock, because number one, he had never seen the Rebbe, and he didn't think that the Rebbe would have what we call today facial recognition of him. But that all being said, we're all not surprised. He said, he says, for such a thing, do you need an answer? Such a thing is certainly good. And then the Rebbe encouraged him, the Rebbe sent him. I mean, the Rebbe went through, the Rebbe told him where to go and who to ask and what to read and where the things printed. And he put it together slowly but surely. And the Rebbe, even commented and edited. The things that the Rebbe took out the most were the things that were in the praise of the Rebbe himself, which even now, in the last month, last month and a half, we're able to get the Toris Menachem Teferes Levi Yitzchak. If you look in Chelik Hey, so you see there something fascinating and unbelievable, and it's if you haven't done it yet, I behoove you to do it. And just like when they printed the Torah of the Rebbe Shmuel, and the Rebbe said to print the pieces that he said, Ein Tzarech Lahatik, Aleph Tzadik Lamed. You don't have to include this, but the Rebbe said, because the Rebbe wrote it, the Rebbe Shmuel, so we'll put it on the bottom, and that's what they did. So all the years till now, even though the Rebbe, you see how dear the Torah of the Rebbe's father is so dear to him that he shared it with us, even intimate letters, and there were select pieces that he let in. The few little personal pieces besides and some of the Torah is replete with personal things, the things about children, etc. And nevertheless, the Rebbe shared that with us. But there are pieces that he is very praiseworthy of the Rebbe's Torah. And that the Rebbe took out, and the Rebbe said not to print. And now, I'll be what the Rebbe gave the Hira then, that even though it was said Ein Tzarech Lahatik, now they're in my ticket, and it's in the back of the fifth volume.
Rabbi Fowler, getting back to the Rebbe's Yachas with his father, did you notice on Haggis that the Rebbe would do that his father would do as well? Like if it was a
the Rebbe said in as many words that he learned certain things from, and he does certain things like his Shver, the Rebbe's Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he does certain things like his father. And I can share with you a few things. We have here Rabbi Lou, which I think might have witnessed some of it also, and his dear friends Ozan Gezud and Wadasa here, Minnesota Rabbi Zeilingold, who saw clearly. Here we see when Rebbe when the Rebbe's Holy Mother's memoirs were printed, she writes there a keta about he was crying very much on a Shabbos Uvorchim when he said, "Chaim sheyesh b'hem chilutz atzonos." And that's not in our Siddur, but most Nuschois have the Yiratzen that you say on Shabbos Uvorchim. And here she writes explicitly that he said it when he was crying, and that he cried more than he usually cried when he said that piece. Rabbi Zangel tells me that he saw clearly how the Rebbe is saying something before Birchas HaChodesh. Clearly. Another thing that we all saw was Akdomus, how we saw how the Rebbe said that the Rebbe did B'faneinu. This whole thing, the style, how the Rebbe wore the talis, so the Rebbe wore the talis curled in, not out, so that you don't see the black stripes. If you look at, you see there's the Sephardic Talesim have a only white stripes. It's white wool, and the things that are black on our Talesim are white on the Sephardic Talesim. And that's because it's our Kabbalah, that the whole thing should be white. We're learning now, we just finished the Rambam, the tzitzis. So there it doesn't speak about that so much. It speaks about just what it should be made from. But our Kabbalah, it has to be white. So you'll see that the Rebbe turned the stripes inside so that they're not visible, and that's how we do it. That's a hanhaga of the Rebbe's father. So that's something that we saw daily, and then there are certainly other hanhagas that the Rebbe saw. There was always a discussion because the Alter Rebbe writes that when you put on tefillin, you have to open up the kesher and close the kesher, and there's a whole discussion about it. And I believe it was in relation to that the Rebbe told Rebbe Zan Garari about it. And some people say, you don't have to do it, you do have to do it. He did like his father told him not to do it, he has to do it. And additionally, the Rebbe had the Rebbe's would put a sleeve over his tefillin that some say that this is a hug of his father. So there are we saw also, but people can say other chassidim after Kriyas Torah every Monday and Thursday during the Mishaberachs, the Rebbe will be moving his lips. And some people are of the opinion that the Rebbe was saying then another thing that is said in all shul, that he said by his father in shul, the all those things, the Kain Baruch HaKmi, all those things that they say in Achena B'Yisrael and that whole keta, and some people say that the Rebbe was saying that also. I don't know for sure, obviously, but there are.
His father would say Akdomus as well in Shavuos.
Yes.
So is that something that I think that's something general the Rebbe would say? So I don't know if that's right.
Well, the Rebbe speaks about it also. The Rebbe also speaks about it a little bit openly about the Menhagim, and that he doesn't mix into what the Menhagim should be or aren't, etc., etc. But the Hanagis that he did, he said clearly that he does like his father. So it's not a big pella.
Did you see throughout the years how we discussed earlier how the Rebbe was makir for those who were Mishamish's father, or the as well as
what?
I think the Rebbe would send some shluchim to Yarchei Kala as well in Parks, Gan Yisrael Parksville. You recall that?
Yeah, and then also first of all the Mishpachas Raskin, who were mentioned earlier, your grandfather and his brothers and your great-grandfather, were always recognized for this also. And sometimes the Rebbe actually called up, and sometimes Rebbe Fabrengen, he had them say l'chaim. And I believe he once said it's Aniva Shalem Koimer. Somebody wasn't involved. And I think
Mendel Geralik has a story.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So I was on gesund
what's that story?
I believe also he didn't come say l'chaim because he wasn't going to come when there was recognition. And actually, his sister and other family members, his mother, they were actually very involved even after the passing of Rebbe Yitzchak. They were involved in Rebbe Tzachana. They actually, his sister her name was Mrs. Almanov. She actually accompanied Rebbe Tzimchana on the train and throughout in parking.
He helped her with the suitcase on the train.
Okay. And he might have helped with the suitcase he himself, but there was much more that even his sister did and the mishpacha, and here that very clearly was makatov to this. So publicly, there were other things that there were people who, and this is about the Rebbe's Rebbe Gross, he helped other people who helped always had a kodesh atoiv. But in the Farbrengen Chafov, the Rebbe told those people to say l'chaim. And so there's an extra additional kiruv.
Was there anything that the Rebbe sponsored in honor of his father?
So there were the hakdoshas that the Rebbe would first of all, I believe I don't have it in front of me.
First, I'm sorry, Rabbi Lou. I should like to get back to you before we get back to Rabbi Feller again. If I'm not mistaken, the first or the second chilek of the Kudos Sichos actually came out in Chafov, correct?
I think it was after my chasna already. Then, yes.
I have the Kudos Sichos near me now, but if I'm not mistaken, Pesach Dover, it was the Chafov Chavbez.
Yes.
One of those years when you were in Tzemtzemdi.
Yes. Yes.
So, was there anything that you notice as well that the Rebbe sponsored or wanted to happen for Chafov in your years? Besides the Hakdosh of the Sichos, I think yearly, correct, Rabbi Feller?
I believe so. And
when the Rebbe Tzimchana passed away, the Rebbe made a Hakdosha. In those days, a Sefer coming out, a Kuntrus coming out, a Maimer coming out was pretty rare. And every single month on the Vav, something came out in Tovshin Chafei. The L'kutei Torah was one of them, the Maimer Vorech, the Hilchos Talmud Torah of the Alter Rebbe in a soft cover. If you check, there's a Hakdosha every month.
If I'm not mistaken, the L'kutei Torah, I think, was only 10 copies, correct? With the Rebbe's, with the Hakdosha.
No.
But the Rebbe gave me
the L'kutei Torah came out.
I think the Rebbe
gave me came out. It cost $10,000, and the Rebbe gave 1,000, and he invited 9 people to join him as a minyan, each to give 1,000. I heard from the Rebbe later on, a few months later. The Rebbe said he invited die was haben verstanden, als sie kriegen mehr wie sie geben. It's a moire dicke tiefe Wort. The Rebbe said, I asked to be joined by people who appreciated that they were getting more than they were giving. In other words, the Rebbe asked you to give, but it's as a favor. He's giving you something. One of them was Moshe Hecht, whose son was here a little while ago, because he made the first Moised named after the Rebbe's mother. So each person, for having made such a L'kutei Torah, each of the people who paid 1,000 was given 10 copies for free. And the Rebbe took his 10 copies, he kept one, and the other 9 he gave autographed and wrote a bracha to the other 9. Just a second, I'll show you my copy. I bought one. It was $5, but I was in the Kerla, so it cost $4. They gave a special rate. The Rebbe asked to make a special rate on it.
If I was in my father's house, I would show you the one that my uncle Zazan Gesund actually wrote a Losha with a similar Losha and gave his Amatana to my father. Now he's back.
Here is the Hakdosha.
Can you read it to us?
Hard to see. L'dikorin harabonis atzitkonis moras chana aleha hashalom shneisem bas harav hagoin v'harav hachosid Reb Meir Shlomo olav hashalom aim kvoi gedushas atma shlita niftere b'yoyim haShabbos kodesh vav tishrei vav da'aser simei tshuva ba'alois hamincha Shabbos shnas tovshin chavei. That was that Hakdosha. There was a limited number because a tenth of them had this Hakdosha in it. So I was like in some 70, and in the coil, whatever it was, I hopped one of these with the Rebbe's Hakdasha on it. But the Rebbe, from his 10, he gave away the other 9.
Wow. Thank you very much for sharing that. Rabbi Felder, speaking about things which...
I believe that...
Sorry, Rabbi Lou, what were you saying?
We're speaking about the Rebbe giving cover to the people who looked after his father. You know the story of Rabbi Yosef Nemoitin. He lived there in Alma-Ata, and he looked after the cave. He made sure the weeds were taken up. He looked after the cave for many years, and his family got out. He was refused time after time. It was already 10 years, years and years. And one year, it must have been about early MEMS maybe, I forgot the exact year, and he went there and he cried, and he said to Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, please help me get out of here, and if I do, I promise you, I'm going to ask your son why he doesn't come to visit. He used to have that machshava zora, mizman lizman. He said to himself, over the years, he was looking after for years and years, he says, why doesn't the Rebbe come and visit his father? And I mean, really, in Tam V'das, it's not even a question. On the cave, it didn't even say his surname, his family name. That, you know, that's how difficult it was. But anyway, and then he said this, he cried, and he said, I'll ask you some. And as he went out, before he went out of the cemetery, coming into the cemetery was a Jewish guy we knew who worked in the government office, some kind of a guy. And he said, "How are you?" The guy says, "You look very depressed." And he told him. So the guy says, "You want to leave? Look, I work in an office with I don't have the power, but I got guys who have the power. Get me such and such amount of money tomorrow morning, and you'll get your exit visa." So it was a big amount of money, but he got it together. He gave it to the guy the next morning, and a week later, he got his exit visa. And then he came to America, and he asked for Yechidus, and he brought with some Kshavim of Rebbe Levi. And the Rebbe stood up. When he came into Yechidus, the Rebbe was standing. And then the Rebbe asked him this and that and the other, and he told the Rebbe everything about it. But he obviously, that machshava that he had in his big depression, he didn't dream of asking. And at the end, as he was walking out, backward, the Rebbe says, "Sidonach," he thought to think of something else. He squeezed out, "Sidonach," and no, he said no more. So the Rebbe said,
"Wow,
you promised that you're going to ask me a question." That's the story that I don't know what the Rebbe said further. So what's the pshat? The pshat is that the Rebbe was there. The Rebbe was there. He's asking, why isn't the Rebbe here? The Rebbe heard him saying that in his mind at that time. He wasn't there in the conventional way, and this is before Gimel Talmud. The Rebbe asked this person, he lived in Crown Heights, Dorn Olam Hazer, not that many years that he passed away, and he said, and he didn't, he in front of the Rebbe, he was with total bittul. Didn't think of asking such a question. And the Rebbe asked him, what about that question? Anyway, I just
very powerful story. Thank you very much for sharing.
Sorry, my nephew Reb Mendel's in the middle of saying fascinating things. The word in the flowing.
Rabbi Lou, I wanted to ask you, you were speaking before, I just had to go to Eretz Yisrael, it was getting late, even though it's getting late by you as well, which we appreciate very much that you're still with us. There was about those to bring into Rabbi Tzachana's apartment. Can you take us in there exactly, like how the scene looked? How many chassidim were come? Was it the Alter chassidim, or was it only those who was mishamash to her husband? What was the atmosphere over there? How long were they? Was there lachayim? Was there?
There was a room in that apartment.
Where would the Rebbe Tzachana be the whole time while the chassidim was bringing the dining room?
She was gracious. She was malchus sheba malchus, and she looked very, very much like the Rebbe. You can see in the pictures. She actually looked very much like the Rebbe. And she, you walked into the apartment, it was like a little alcove, and then you turned right, sort of, and there was like a little sitting room. That's where we used to meet her all the time. On the wall was a picture with the Rebbeim, who we have a picture of. It was like a composite picture with Xavier of the Mittler Rebbe and the Marash, and the pictures of the Alter Rebbe and Samach Tzedek and the Rashab and the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe. There was such a picture going around in the 1950s and 60s. She had that picture up in that room.
Made out of wood? It was a wooden piece?
It was with a frame, yeah. And then there was a table. So let's say maybe the table was a small like a table was maybe 8 feet long. I know, I didn't measure it. But it was a table. A few people. I was there a number of times with other couples and my wife. So probably around that table could easily sit, let's say, on a Shabbos. It didn't happen, but it could have happened. Probably could have fit 8, 9, 10 people, maybe. And the Chassidim who came were the elder Chassidim, people with the white beards. Like it was Reb David Raskin was in charge. He was in charge, but first of all, he's the one that told me you can come. That proved that he was in charge. He was Bechalal, he was the Schlissel to the Rebbe in Chana. In fact, I have a Chava, a very dear Yedid, also from Minnesota, in Shlichus, by the name of Rabbi Osher Zeilengold. And he got engaged, actually, to Leah Shalom, the sister of the Rabbi Hecht who spoke here. And he was a Chosin, and it was in Cheshvan time, Tov Chof Dalid, and he asked me, he was a shy, he was a Chassidish guy, Osher Zeilengold, and I was always a big mouth. So he asked me if I'll arrange for him to go visit Rebbe Chana. He knew I'd been a few times. He'd never been. So I went to Reb David Raskin, and I said, can I arrange for Osher to go to the Rebbetzin? So Reb David said to me, it's a lot more comfortable for him if I call up myself, because he knows different pressures, whatever it is, he wants it to happen. And it somehow or another, he said it's easier for him if I call up. And he gave me the number. And I called up the Rebbe Chana. And she said, the Zehaloshen, next to Dienstag, 8 Tage in Abend, und könnt kommen mit einer Eishes Chava. Those were the words. She says, next Tuesday, 8 o'clock, and you can come with your wife. So I said to her, I'm not trying to go, I'm not trying to get another entrance there. He's the Chosin, not me. So she said, geht doch überall zusammen. Kommen durch zusammen. She said, you go everywhere together. It's a similar, she knew everything that was happening in 770. We were very, very close friends. She said, you travel everywhere together, come here together as well. We were there. So Reb David Raskin was known as the key to the apartment of the Rebbe Chana. I'll tell you just one more thing. A Pearson Rishon Sheberishin. You talk about the letters from the Rebbe's father, and when that was coming out in the early Lameds, I met the Rebbe's sister-in-law in Lubavitch House in London, Mrs. Gorari. And we were talking this, that, the other. It had to do with her husband. Well, in different yonim. So I told her, you know that the Rebbe is printing. No, I asked her, did you ever get a letter from your father-in-law? Did you ever get a letter from Rabbi Yitzchak? And she said yes. I think she said one, maybe two. A mazel tov, I think. The wedding or something. So I said, that, you know, the Rebbe is printing the letters of his father. This was the time, and that Kufa every few months was coming out, the Tanya, and we heard before, was coming out, the Sikha and Shugas Hashas, whatever, all the different things, and the Igros. So I said, you know, if the Rebbe might like to print it. So she said, I'll find out. And afterwards, she told me, it's an interesting answer. I've never, ever told this story. So she said that she asked the Rebbe, and he said that the letters we're publishing are letters which have a to'elas l'rabim. In other words, not personal things. They're there for to'elas l'rabim, for the benefit of the many, and the letter that you got is not included. So you can learn what you want from that answer, but the Benegela Poil, the Maisebo Poil, a lesson you can learn is that the letters that were printed is for us to learn. The Rebbe said, I printed letters that are negea to the people who get them. You have the sefer, you have those letters, it's for us. Those letters which were not for us, it's not relevant. What was to us at that moment. Anyway, I just I said
Shukayach for sharing. Very powerful. Rabbi Lou, is there anything about the Rebbe's tefillos in general which you think the public should know of, the different hagis, or
about the Rebbe?
The tefillos, when the Rebbe would lead Chazan. Anything that comes to mind?
Yes, a million things that one would notice. You know, I have an anicle. He corrects me because he looks at all the videos. You know, there's so many. The young guys today.
I'm getting questions in. So as I get them,
he saw me in my house on it wasn't. It couldn't have been a video. Oh no, he couldn't see the video from Motzi Yontav or something, or from a Fabrengit. I was wiping the becher with a napkin. And he was in my house. So he said the Rebbe did it with 3 fingers. I was doing it with 2 fingers. He said the Rebbe did it with 3 fingers. So you're asking me what the Rebbe did. These people telling me what I saw 60 years ago. These guys, you know, Baruch Hashem, we have a lot of people. It's you know, all different types of ways of expressing his kashrus. Some people they express his kashrus that way, and some the other. Everyone, it's through learning the Rebbe's Torah. But one thing, which I'm not sure if Rabbi Mendel, I went out for a second. I had to move to a different room. Do you speak about the Rebbe, how he put on tefillin? It's a rare thing. The Rambam, in one place in the whole Yad HaChazoko that I know of, after 39 times at least davening it, the Rambam says in one place where he mentions where he does different than his father. Abba Mora mina oisrim v'ani mina matirim. And there's a lot of things you can learn from that. Now the Rebbe that I know of, there's one place where the Rebbe writes, my father-in-law did this. I do like the Rebbe said that he has a little, he wears the shadel on the tefillin by davening, and it has a little hole. My shved didn't. The reason I know it because it didn't have a hole. And the kesher is supposed to touch the bias bisman atfila, the eis atfila. So since it didn't have a hole, it means they didn't wear it. And then the Rebbe writes a very telling sentence. Just the toichin was mistama kain limdoi oviv. In other words, his father, the Rebbe Rashab, probably taught him that way. This bar mitzvah. I think the Rebbe is implying that I'm doing like my father told me. I know that the Rebbe did tell Reb Zalman Garari and Rabbi Yitzchak Garari about opening up the kesher every day, and the Rebbe said a question on that about a hefsek between the bracha and putting on the tefillin altogether. The Rebbe says I don't, and because that's how my father taught me. Wow. So that's one thing. You see how the Rebbe with the hanhog of his father. Another thing I just mentioned. Not when the Rabbi daven for an Omid, I discussed this with Diane Raskin, and he just said he couldn't think of any. The Rebbe, when he said Oshamnu, when the Rebbe said Vidui, so the Rebbe's place was at the table in the yeshiva. He davened in the Bachrim's minyan, 3:15 Mincha. Because we heard before that he very rarely davened Shachris with the minyan, 2-3 times a year. And but the Rebbe would sit there, then he stand up from after Moedim, facing Durham Zayt, facing south of the room, facing the Cheder Sheni. And then he would say, the introduction to Tachnun, to Vidui. He would say, facing that way, and then the Rebbe would turn left and face the wall, which is Mizrach, to say the actual Shamnu Badno, and he stayed there till he said Heshonu, because he banged again. And then he turned again right to say Keller Hapayim. And I asked him if I told him this whole thing, and he asked him if there's anything about facing Mizrach or something, and he said he couldn't think of it. I mean, he wasn't looking at any farm, it was just in shul or something years ago. And he said the only thing he can think of is that he didn't think it was proper to do it facing the oilam, so vidui, facing the oilam. That's the only thing he can think of. But that's one thing I can think of. Okay, you know, when the Rebbe did with the tefillin, you know, he kissed the tefillin, including in Volotzion, Veniske, Venichi, Venir, Venirash, in those places. I'll tell you another thing. I don't want to be Chas Shalom, say like use an expression that you'd use on a stam boss of a dom, but the Rebbe, when he was a chazan, was very user friendly. What does that mean? He was perfect in everything, and that was perfect as a chazan. What does it mean? When the Rebbe said Tilim at the Shia Tilim at the end of davening, at Oizgolost in Tov Shechov Hey, he concluded the last posik of each kapitel, and the last kapitel of that Yom Tilim, he said the last 2 psukim. So it got you a bit ready for the Kaddish. Now, when it was Kuf Yutes, the Bey Askina, now in the middle of Kuf Yutes, well, Hashem, when it was Kuf Yutes, the Rebbe at Oizgolost, he concluded the 8th of each of the 8 psukim in each ois, he said that pasuk, and when it came by Lamids and by Tov, he said the last 2 psukim loud, as if each of these oisius was a kapitel b'fnei atzmai in the thing. So I always thought, I always have kashis. The Alter Rebbe says when you have a negative thought on a fellow Jew, it's like a machshavas avodah zorah. You should throw it out of your mind. But whenever the chazonim, you know, I don't know where they're holding. But I'm reminded that there was a yechidus, and the Rebbe told somebody that the key to everything is to be a Masuda. So he asked the Rebbe, it was a Baal Tshuva, and in the 60s, and he asked the Rebbe, how could you be a Masuda? So the Rebbe said, the Rosh Hashanah, the head, the way to be a Masuda is from davening Shachris with a minyan, because that's the Rosh of the day, and your whole day is Masuda. And if you daven Shachris with a minyan, your machshavas zoris are of an elevated level. They're on a higher level. He says, what does that mean? The Rebbe said, you're thinking about the chazan's going too fast, too slow, and lost tois, and lost nishtois. So those, I guess, are permissible machshavas zoris to start frustrating. But the Rebbe, when he was chazan, just like in everything else, was so sensitive and so, misuda and so real.
Was the vibe Chaf Av in Samdi more of like a Yud Shvat, the atmosphere, was it like tense? Or was it can you maybe describe a little bit how it was?
Now, Yud Shvat B'chalal, in those years, there was the Hilula of the Rebbe, and there was the Yom Nesius of the Rebbe. The hulul of the Rebbe was 95% of what everybody felt, or maybe more. Everyone went to the oil of the Frierdiker Rebbe and wrote a panta of Frierdiker Rebbe. And we're joining the Rebbe in the yard of his shver of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And everyone went to the oil also on Yud Beis Tammuz, by the way. Now, as time went by, Yud Shvat became the Yom HaMalchus. We do all the minhagim. The Rebbe Kehes and Tondas. You do all those things. But and I heard from the Rebbe the Shabbos before I went to England the first time, which I mentioned before, Pashas Vayakel, Tov Shin Chof Gimel. The Rebbe spoke that this week is Beis Nissen, which is the Hilula of the Rebbe Neshmas Eden. But was es uns nennte, what's nearer to us is the fact that it's the Yom HaNesius, and it's also written explicitly in the Igris Kodesh of the Rebbe in the Yuds, in the Pesach Dovas and things like that, that the Rebbe says that that's what's nearer to us. So Yud Shvat, in the earlier years, the years which I was there in 770, I was in many, Baruch Hashem, somehow I managed from England to be there a lot of Yud Shvats. You know, I was there, Chav Ches, Chav Tes, Lamed, certainly Mem and Nun, and a few others in the middle. The earlier years, it was more the Hilula of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and I guess what the younger Hasidim, the people like Rabbi Geshem Mendel Gerelik, you heard that, he would come in, to him, anything that happened in the world was how it connects you to the Rebbe. He was my mashpia for 2 years. When I was in Torah V'das, he's the one that taught me Chassidus. And the gang that he gave is that everything connects through the Rebbe. But I looked at the environment, and that wasn't necessarily in the forefront. Chof Ov was the Rebbe's day. So Chof Ov, it was not Chas Shalom reducing anything for Faket. Yud Shvat is the Yom HaMalchus. But because there was another element there of Kedusha, Tachlis HaKedusha. In Chof Ov was maybe the only day, because in those days we didn't farbring even until Tovshin Chof Beis, we didn't farbring Yud Aleph Nissen, especially. So Chof Ov was the day which Hoyle Rebbe. It was totally a day of the Rebbe's personal life. There was no other day like that. And then it became Vav Tishrei in Tavshin Chof Hei. A day which is totally a day connected to Rebbe. Today, in Baruch Hashem, we have other days. Each one is mamish. The Yudala Kislev, but it connected the Rebbe with the Frierdiker Rebbe. Das hat mir wohnen mit der Akpat Yudala Kislev, and then they came b'Meshech Hashonim, Chodesh Kislev and Hey Tevis. These are they're powerful days. But in those days, Chof Ov was the day, and that's how I felt. I remember when I was in Camp Gan Yisrael in Tezayin, the first time I properly heard it, I wasn't that good. I was just heard them singing songs. But here, Rabbi Yitzchak Block, Olav Shalom, I remember him speaking there in the big lawn in Ellenville, New York, and they spoke about Reb Leivik, it was on the level of somehow a legend. You're hearing about something that, and it was connected to the Rebbe, and everyone knew, and everyone for this 5 years after the Rebbe's Nesius, everyone knew that this day is the Rebbe's day. This is the Rebbe's day. And that feeling, I think, was always there. And Rabbi Avram Shem Tov, who brought in the entire camp for Shabbosim sometimes. Imagine a camp, a summer camp in New York. I don't know where they even slept, what they did there with Shabbosim. The logistics alone. They brought hundreds and hundreds of kids would come it became the biggest Yom Tov of the Rebbe.
The Rebbe was Messiachas to the campers in those early years? Or the Fabringers?
Rabbi Mendel fellow will tell you a lot better than me, but sure he did.
I mean, in the Yuz, when you were coming from camp.
In the Yuz, the camp didn't come in.
What years was
the camp started in Tovshin Tes Zayin.
Correct.
The Rebbe came to camp that summer. No, he came in Yud Zayin. Tes Zayin, he came a day before the camp. I don't remember it. I don't remember Yud Zayin something special. The camp didn't know. I would guess certain people went in, like people like Meir Hala.
When did this minig start, by the way, bringing in camp to Chafov?
I think in the Lametz.
Started in the Lametz.
I just want to add that on Good Shvat there was a certain Ungezeugenkeit. I don't want to use grobe Wörter. But on Chafov we saw a solemnity, but at the same time it was a day of sharing and a day, it was like a serious. But it wasn't that. It was a Dehavenkeit, and you see it in the Fabringen also. And we are not the ones to mark these things, but just the way like Michael was saying earlier. On Good Shvat it's Hilula from the Frierdiker Rebbe. Chafov, we don't have them. I mean, that's what we felt.
Rabbi Feller, we have to wrap up this program soon. I just wanted to ask you, a few people asked, you're a Bacher in the Nuns, correct? In Sabasamdi, the late Mam's Nuns? The Rebbe's father's niggin was, if we can say, was the central niggin in those years. After Stender Sichos and after, I think, Erev Yom Kippur, the Rebbe started after the Sichos.
In the base.
In base, correct. So can you tell, I think also the Rebbe's father's niggin was sung after all the Rebbeim by the Satan Nagunim.
And I think, to be honest, I believe that was also an innovation of Rabbi Yosef Angesund. The Rebbe, of course, it was with Berechus and it was when, but I believe it came a little bit from Yisrael Tata that the first few times that it happened. That being said, I remember very well, my uncle Angesund also remembers that in Tovshin and Ches, when the Rebbe, all the years, the Rebbe always started when it was his own hakofa, the first and the last hakofa, which the Rebbe himself went into the middle to dance. In the earlier years with his brother-in-law, and in the later years when it was himself. So the Rebbe used to always begin the niggin, yeah, and that's what everyone's saying. It was like together. And Toshim Ches, the Rebbe said, yeah, and he started that niggin. That was a whole new chayus and a whole gili. Then there was years that you could look into the Shunas exactly what, because it did go one time, I believe it was again. That other meeting, the one that we used to always sing, but that because the Rebbe always sang his fathers, at least in those years, in the Mems, in the early moons, after Ataresa, they sang the Rebbe's father's Akofas thing, even before that Akofas started. That was one of the three Negunim. In addition to and Ufarasta. Then the third Niggun was the Rebbe's father's name.
That was started?
Yeah, 100%. Turned around, and he with his hands up clapping, he always started one of those three Negunim. And the Rebbe came in always with the same Niggun also. Yeah. So
that was more Leil Shmini Atzeres, no?
Last night, it's a Gespräch on another time. They're bigger experts than me, but when the Rebbe sang that as the Hakofas, as his Hakofas, and then he was holding himself to Sefer Torah because he wasn't dancing with his hand on the arms of his brother-in-law. He was standing himself with both hands, holding the Sefer Torah and shaking the Sefer Torah, etc. To this niggin, this was a gili that's very difficult to describe. But you can imagine in and of itself, and that I was dancing, that I would push it that year also. I would say that may have been in a certain sense the pinnacle, certainly in length of the Hakofa, that both Hakofas, both nights, and the one during the day lasted 15 minutes. Whereas the Rebbe's own coffee used to last, we were happy when it lasted 3 minutes. And usually it was 2 minutes, and sometimes it was 4 minutes. It was beyond the scope of anything you could think of. And usually it was more 1.5 minutes. I remember one year when I heard Dr. Ira Rice, I was on Gizud, Pasha jumped up and danced. Also, he was taking really Rashag's pulse and whatever else. But this was to extend the coffee. And here the Rebbe for 15 minutes with Dan Nigan and making the Sefer Torah, singing his father's Nigan, it took on a whole new dimension. And then the Giluim, a lot of times when the Rebbe, in those years when he started again to stand up and to dance with Simcha, it was so many times with his father's Nigan, this took on a whole new thing. I know, I should mention, I don't know the exact, and there's more to this, but I should mention that also on the Tefillas of Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, the end of Yosef, the Hayom Tam Seinu, they also sing 770, the Rebbe's father's Nigan. And I don't know exactly when it started, but it was a Klorazach, and that also gave my uncle was just mentioning earlier how the Rebbe said that in Rosh Hashanah till Shach is Rosh Hashanah, it's like the Rosh Hashanah of the day, Rosh Hashanah. So Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, that they should sing, but it still is Dafka that Nigan, was also an Inyan, and there's more to that story which will have to be filled in. But the fact is, just the fact, as Muflag Zingim Rebbe started, they used to sing the Rebbe's father's Nigan, for Hayom Tam Seinu, and the Rebbe at least banged on the standard. The word it wasn't a time of big Gilu in terms of Simcha, but it was a time of Gilu B'Rada and singing his father's Nigan. So
if I'm not mistaken, I don't even think the Nigan actually starts that way. That was like the Rebbe's breakthrough. I think the Nigan starts yeah. The Rebbe started like from the high point.
100%. Rebbe starts with that Indian brother. Even when they say
I remember hearing, I think Rabbi Shlomo Zarchi told me that once I think it's in the early years, it's like Elter Chosses said that Nigan really the Rebbe says Zay and Dafka Zay. It was some kind of Eishbrach like that, like.
But the
Rebbe got right into it.
100%.
Very interesting. Rabbi Lou, someone asked about the name Levi Yitzchak. Can you perhaps just briefly speak about the chshivus that the Rebbe had when people gave the names after his immediate family, especially his father that we're dealing with today?
I know stories of different people. I know someone who the Rebbe Tzimchana asked them to name their child Levi Yitzchak. I know someone who the Rebbe asked to name their daughter after his mother's mother. And I think it's in the Igris as well, someone who we know quite well. And I myself, personally, we had a son. And this is already, Kenai Nahara was our 13th child. It's not, the oldest or anything. And we named him Yisrael Ayaleib. And we got a letter from the Rebbe and the letter to the Bris. But the letter arrived after the Bris. And the bottom of the letter was typed on Nun Beis, P.S. Nisakev Hashiloyach, the Shiluach, sending this letter was delayed. ובינתיים נזכבל הידיעה שנקרא שמוי בישראל, ישראל על ילד שליטה. And meanwhile, we received the news that he was named Yisrael al Yalei Shlita, and the Rebbe added B'ksav Yad Kochoy v'yikuimu kol habrachos shenizbochu, and may all the brachas that you are blessed be fulfilled. And he signed his name. I have a lot of letters from the Rebbe, Baruch Hashem, but this is the only one where the Rebbe signed under the PS, not under the letter, under the name Yisrael Ayalev he signed. Just interesting something. But
Tafshin Yud Beis was the famous story with Levi Yitzchak Brook. The Rebbe wrote Le'erich Yom Shana Tevis.
And that was Because your great grandfather.
But I'm mistaken. Just the word the Erich Yom Shon and Tevis was a B'Ksaviat Kache, and the rest was in print.
I mean, just the kids are Nimritz. Your great grandfather went into the Rebbe's mother, and she expressed that
grandfather.
No, I mean your great grandfather.
I have his diary. It was my grandfather went into the Rebbe Tzachana, and she said that for so many years since.
Your grandfather went in. I mean to say, but it was at the time.
He wrote to his father, and he was neighbors with Mendel and Rishon LeZion.
That's Menach. So he was talking about to the Chassidim who and he asked the Chassid right maybe around the book to actually give that name, and he gave, of course,
I think the Rebbe Tzachana sent a baguette or something.
And she sent letters, and she said she's sending a script, which means like a monetary like a check or something. And she would send the money. Also, that shows a great Akaras HaTov. She wasn't, the world's wealthiest woman, but it was a great Akaras HaTov and a nachas for her, and obviously for the Rebbe. We know that when they were making the yeshiva, I believe it was in Kiryat Gat, if I remember correctly. The Rebbe said that the children are called Levi Yitzchak should be the one. There's a picture that was circulating recently of some even young children who were with the spades and the shovels of the cement to put it in the Anachas Avnal. And this is here the Rebbe is telling, the children should do something. So certainly on a day like Chafav, each and every one of us, the Rebbe wants that each and every one of us should learn from the Balei Lula, and to learn not only his Torah and the Rebbe's Torah, but their lives and the Balei Lula, and therefore our connection to the Balei Lula, our Rebbe, our prayer, Yeshua's B'Kerev Haaretz, in each and every one of our lives, whatever we need, B'Panachayim, Zayin Vicha, B'Kurim, B'Gashrus, B'Ruchnius, and the light, and women and girls and children, everyone. Including in of course the Ruchnius and in Gashmius, learning and davening and Torah, and Afat Samayonis and Torah Kardon and to Zechfirim, like the Rebbe wants us to. That brings nachas, like my uncle said earlier, that the Rebbe, even though he was stuck in dire straits. Everybody once in a while feels that they're in dire straits. Nevertheless, with what you have, you can accomplish so much, and that's the koiches, that's the avodah that we have. And certainly, Hashakoyach have been seen for putting this together and sharing from the Chassidim who joined here, and may each and every one of us be inspired to continue to grow and to fulfill the kavanah of the Rebbe. And like we said, and I believe at the outset that this is the only day that the Rebbe shared of bringing a sicha throughout the Nesius. There's no other day like Chafav. In the whole time, in the whole season.
Even after Memches, when the Rebbe starts bringing during the weekday, there was still
Shundish or something. There's always a Sachs or something.
Was there every Chalukah for Chafav?
Not there was dollars, I believe, but that's not.
So I don't think there was ever a mimer when it was a weekday. It was a mimer Kein Tzichel, but a mimer with the Nikachon and everything. If I'm not mistaken,
I mentioned earlier that everything even comes with the kapot with the cattle on top of the kapot. But
what year was that until that the Rebbe didn't work our twice?
I don't know the exact year, but like I mentioned earlier, Tov Shalom and Aleph, the style of the bringing was clearly a different style.
It was more like a kind of Hamish. Was more like
it was intimate. It was a whole different thing. Later on, the Fabring was also on video, on cable. That was also a little bit different. But certainly, it's a day that the Rebbe gives us keches and hashpah of the Balei Lula, and the Rebbe certainly can affect us, and certainly we would glean and take these keches and apply it to our lives, and grow and give the Rebbe and the Rebbe's father nachas, and certainly each will have nachas from each other. With be zeicher to have the kiyum Yehudim and Zenzach Rebbe Rebbe starten. Und alle Tzadikim, Meilim HaKadosh, and Bini Beis HaMikdash Shlishi, in Ariel, the Chedesh Ariel, like Rabbi Grezman mentioned earlier, that Yahweh Ariel, Ariel.
Amen. Yeshakayach, Rabbi Feller.
Amen. The big Yeshakayach. And Yeshakayach the Mendel for
Rabbi Lou, I'd just like to end the program today before we announce the Pirsum Rishon from Jem. For your closing words, what's your message you'd like to share with us as we end this Chafav program in general, the day of Chafav this year? What do we take from the day?
And what I'd like to take for myself, you see, there's the Hakora of a very holy and special Jew, and a Yid of Mesiris Nefesh, and all the things which the Rebbe told us. There's the Inyan which he was the Rebbe's father. That's already enough. It's like Rabbi Yankel Hecht said, that's enough. But then there's the Chayitan Liboy, which I mentioned before. It's the fact that Rabbi Levi Yitzchak lived through different challenges. There was a challenge of being there in prison, but when he was a Rav, there was also a challenge. It wasn't a simple going. It was the communists, or there was this First World War when the refugees came. He together with the Rebbe and Chana, had to constantly, always improvise, innovate. He ran the first Chabad house in the world. His house. He was Makar people, the Manoyach Harav Motche Garari, who passed away this year. So I'm looking at the Choshev, and the Choshev's the Rabbanim in Crown Heights. And Rabbi Levi was his sondik, by the way. And he was Makar of his father, who was a medical student originally. And he and his sons, the Rebbe and his brother, Label, were encouraged by the father to be Makarev. He was named after his father, whose name was also Motche Garari. That's an example. He did a tremendous amount of hafotza. In the shul, he was dealing with a wicked, cruel, Soviet, communist, repressive, totalitarian regime. And there's no such thing as taking off work Yom Kippur. So people are anusim, those who didn't give up their jobs because they would have died, they would have been arrested for parasitism. People were going to work on Yom Kippur. So they made a minyan 6 o'clock in the morning to be able to go to the Ikar Tfilas. These people came back at the end of the workday, 4 or 5 o'clock. They must have walked the whole way. So I knew people who walked, already in the 80s, and they came back for Ne'ilah. And I think the Rebbe Tzachana writes that the Rebbe Yitzchok told her that the kavana and the fichas al nefesh, their outpouring of their souls in their davening by Ne'ilah, he was makana. He felt humbled by it. So he appreciated the pnimius of a yid. You see all these qualities which the Rebbe taught us to look for. But the one I want to bring out is that when you know what you have to do it. The fact that it's impossible, do it anyway. And there's a letter from the Rebbe. Somebody writes to the Rebbe. The Rebbe gave him a task to do. And Rahman al-San, he was disabled, he got sick, whatever it was, something, his health did not permit it. It became impossible. He asked the Rebbe to forgive him. So the Rebbe said, I expected you write to me asking for a bracha that the mania should be taken away, that the ishlius, which you have to do, that's the given. That's the thing. So that's one thing you see from Rabbi Levi Yitzchok, from the Rebbe Zechana. What had to happen, there were people who were living in the glory of the world, Rabbonos in a major town. Even when they had it, and they had the glory, they were really, really working very hard to see what was the real reason they were doing it and to make sure that they fulfilled it. Not how could they be yotzei. And even when it became impossible, Rabbi Yitzchak showed that it's possible. So nobody of us has to sit around and write chidush. That's not I or you or the people who are watching here, with all due respect. But every one of us has a small thing that we know that the Rebbe would like us to do. Maybe in a pardon?
Gracie Asher Kayach for those warm words. Thank you very much for sharing.
So I have a ksiva toiva.
Amen.
Ki do that Chof of is mem yoim lufnei Rosh Hashanah.
Correct. Thank you so much, Rabbi Lil. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for putting this together, and thank Rabbi Fella and Rabbi Hecht and Rabbi Grezman. I felt very uplifted. I'm sorry for speaking so much myself, but
it's unfortunate it has to come to an end. If only this can just continue. Everything is mugwal though.
Anyway,
we will end today's program by showing two previous renditions from Gem. We'd like to take this opportunity to thank Rabbi Elkanah Shmatkin, Rabbi Mendel, and Rabbi Ezra Reamer from the staff at Gem for providing these two beautiful videos of the Rebbe. The first video is from the Farbrengen of Chof of Tafshin Lamed Hey, where we see various Atzkanim and Shluchim presenting the Rebbe with different keys in different matanis between the Sichas. And the second video is of Chof of Tafshin Lamed Vav during davening, and it was a Yom Kriya that day. So we can see how the Rebbe brought the Sebetera to the Bima and walked back, and then it was called up for his Aliyah. Without further ado, we will now play those two beautiful videos.
Ay, 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 ay.